Well, hello everybody. I'm Mal Burns, and welcome to this week's edition of the Inworld Review. It is the 18th of June of the grand old year 2017. And we weren't with you last week. We weren't able to fill the show properly last week, so apologies for that. But we're here this week, and we're looking forward to another great show next week too. Booked in advance, as it should be, we hope. Anyway, hi there. Before I go anywhere further, I'm just going to introduce the folks that are with us here today. As usual, running all our camera systems, as well as taking his place on the seats here, we've got James out loud. So welcome, James.
Oh, thank you, Mel. It's a pleasure to be here.
And this week's special guest is a chap of many, many talents indeed, as we will be, and some history as well, as we'll be hearing when we go through the show. He's somebody I've actually been meaning to get over here on several occasions, because his name often pops up as, well, we think he did that, or you should talk to him about that and stuff. So anyway, now I've got him here and I'm talking to him, and his name is Mike Lorrey. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you for having me here.
Great, thank you for being here. Now we can really sort of dive into the deep end here. I think we'll just talk a little bit about you. I think the most well, the most exciting thing, because we've just been chatting offline a little bit, is obviously this thing called the grid phone. But I'm going to leave that a little bit because I think that opens up so many possibilities. First of all, I don't know how much you would want to be sharing with the audience here about your history, but you did begin in Second Life. You've been in OpenSim. You've been in other platforms, and returned a year or so to OpenSim, where you're doing things here. And you're also part of the new IME, which is I always Infinite Metaverse Alliance. I'm always on the verge of saying immersive, but the Infinite Metaverse Alliance. So a hell of a lot going on here. Maybe you'd just like to give us a little roundup of where you've been and what you've done so far, so to speak.
Okay, well, the long-time people in virtual worlds probably remember me from Second Life. I was Int Liber Brodigan, and I was one of the top developers and land barons on the grid back in the 2006 to 2010 period. And then we had a bit of a dispute with the lab. They took everything, and we wound up in a legal dispute, and that eventually settled. And but along the way, I had run the Encapsulate Capital Exchange, where we helped capitalize a number of well-known businesses in virtual worlds, from Metaverse TV to Central Grid, which was the first commercial OpenSim really functioning grid of any kind in OpenSim, and along with a number of other businesses that people are probably still aware of. And so I, stepped away from virtual worlds for a few years, and since I started getting back into things after writing a book, and I was looking for a place to make cover art for my novel, and so I decided I was going to, rejoin OpenSim to build everything to do that. And a friend invited me to Kitely, and the infamous Tizzers Fox Chase. It suggested I join here, and so I joined the Kitely, and I immediately got caught up in the community, and I've been doing things like I got the OpenSim Embassy going in Second Life, and I'm running a building for the International Space Flight Museum, which has facilities both in SL and in Kitely, and I teach scripting and Blender classes in Kitely, and I have my own business, which we sell Inworld under the name Hypersonic Systems. In the real world, it's a company, Galactic Systems LLC in Delaware, and we do all sorts of scripted devices, from multi-chairs to whirlpools and all sorts of cool stuff. And the newest thing that we're working on is the grid phone, which is answering a few issues that I felt that are problematic in OpenSim, and really need to, it's an empty niche, I think, in communications for people in the metaverse as a whole. So that's what I've been doing.
Okay, well, folks, I told you there was a lot to this guy. Let me start with some of the more immediate stuff rather than the technical stuff. I think it's about 2 weeks ago, we came with Hypergrid Safari and we visited your the Kitely version of your International Space Flight Museum. As you said, you've got a smaller version. Well, you told me at the time, but the reason you love it in Kitely is you've got more space, for one thing. But I was quite impressed how extensive that is, because you literally have 3D replicas there, some more detailed than others, obviously, of basically all the vehicles that have left the planet's surface over the decades. Plus, signage, lists of all the astronauts, and it is very international affair. It covers, the pioneers from all regions of the world, really, including a few. We've got a monkey and a dog. We've got Leica, yes. And there was the monkey. I forget the monkey's name.
Ham.
Yeah. Ham, that's it. Ham and Leica are there too. So it's you've really got the whole hog in the, the international aspect of that. And as you walk around the exhibits, especially when you get up to that upper level, and go around in a circle, you're sort of moving through time, really, aren't you? As you see everything from Sawyers to Apollos, and I never remember what half of them were called. But intriguing experience. So with all this other stuff you do, right? I think my first question has got to be, what made you do that as well? Or is it just an all-time hobby of yours, fascination with that field?
Yeah, well, I've always been fascinated with space stuff, and before I got into Second Life, I actually I've been doing various sorts of startup ventures since I got out of the Air Force, and so one of those was actually a venture that had been proposing to build a small single stage to orbit reusable spacecraft. And so I've got to know quite a few people in what's called the new space industry, and so I've just always been into that sort of stuff, and whether it's non-fictional, real life space stuff, or fictional stuff like Star Wars, I'm kind of a nut for anything space.
Well, I have to say that exhibit is quite marvelous, and for those who weren't with us on Safari, you should really check that out. I presume they can find it easily enough by going to the Kitely Grid landing and looking it up.
Yeah, the region is called IS Museum, so it's pretty easy to find.
Okay. Now, that leads me rather neatly into the worlds of fiction, because you did tell me again before we're on air that you are working on something, Star Trek, isn't it? There's an awful lot of Star Trek in OpenSim and everywhere, I think, but you...
Actually, Star Wars.
Oh, yes. Star Wars. Okay, right. I knew I got it. I should have known. I got it wrong. Okay, that's more like it. Star Wars. That's more my generation.
Yeah, I have 2 regions of my own in Kitely, and one of them is called Naboo, and so we're building a replica of Naboo City and the spaceport, and of course Gunga City, where the Gungan aliens live under the water, and so I've got the Gungan City pretty much finished, and so now we're moving on to doing the Theed City, where the Queen of Naboo lives, and so forth, and so I'm just kind of a nut for Star Wars stuff, and it's more of a personal thing than I used to do Star Wars roleplay in Second Life, but there isn't a whole lot of Star Wars folks in OpenSim. It seems to be an interesting gap in the OpenSim community. So it's just I'm hoping that more people join in. But yeah, it's.
I guess there's something really rather enduring about the Trekkie generations, as it were. And I mean, for somebody my age, and I'm no spring chicken now, the Star Wars thing, when was it? The 70s, I was in my 20s, I guess, when the first ones came out. So that's been there in my whole life, so to speak. I mean, obviously, there've been games on that. There've been ultimate franchises, some of which I believe are now withdrawn because now Disney is trying to consolidate the universe. But it must be a task and a half to actually take a fantasy universe like the Star Wars universe, as it were, throughout the novels, the the films, and then all the offshoots like comic books, novels, games, and to actually visualize that virtually, as it were. I mean, you can do you can do a cantina, or you can do a
Right.
Millennium Falcon, can't you? You can do all these things, but to visualize something or to do something meaningful within a scope of something so vast, fictional empire.
Yeah, and Naboo is particularly challenging because there's tons of Star Wars fan content on the web that you can download, and so there's a lot of different, all the X-wings and the Millennium Falcon and the TIE Fighter and all that sort of stuff is, the fans love all that stuff, and so there's a lot of that material out there, so it's easy to get. But Naboo occupies this weird situation in Star Wars fandom because there's a lot of fan dislike of the first episode. There's a lot of fans who really hate Jar Jar Binks and the Gungans in general, as well as controversy about what sort of ethnicities the Gungans represent, and so there's not very much Gungan or Naboo content out there on the web. So it's been something where I've been making all of the content myself, and that forced me into buckling down and learning to use Blender, which I had avoided for years. And so I needed to really learn that, and that got me into really studying Blender and becoming proficient at it. And that led to me winding up teaching Blender when the previous teacher left Kitely. And so it just kind of, snowballed into all these different projects. So, they needed the building at the ISM, and so that I could do that, and so I just kind of jumped into that as well. And I just tend to jump into projects and give my time and work on things. And
Mike, yeah. So those builds are on Kitely, both the Gungan City, yes, and Theed. Did you find that anything in Kitely in terms of physics is better for the underwater simulation?
Well,
any special features for that?
Yeah, physics in general, because Kitely hasn't gone to the 0.9 version of OpenSim, mm-hmm, does not have the UBODE physics engine.
Right.
And of course, the ODE physics engine is simply unusable for vehicles. It's got, as a scripter, I've gone into the scripting engine and found that there's some actually the coder who developed ODE really didn't even complete the vehicle motor code. And so it's impossible really to make a vehicle move by standard vehicle engine physics in ODE. So sure, we're using Bullet in our region there to be able to do that. And so we've got things working in there. We've got speeders, so we're going to have some speeder racing in the sim, and we can go through underwater pretty well. And I'm building. If you remember from the episode 1, there was the Gungan sub, the Bongo 2 sub that they took through the center of the planet. So I've been building one of those, and what we're going to be doing is I'm making a mesh model of the terrain for the whole sim, and I'm going to drop the sim terrain to the bottom. And so we're going to have the planet surface is all going to be mesh, and we're going to have a system of tunnels through under the water. And it's going to be an underwater roller coaster ride for people to ride the Bongo 2 sub.
That sounds great.
And we're going to have the sea monsters chasing you and that sort of thing. So it's going to be a little bit of a haunted house sort of effect in there as well. So,
great. Oh, great plan.
It should be fun when it's done.
Yeah.
That sounds like quite an adventure. Maybe I should show using the current terminology, a quest.
Yeah.
Always. No, okay. Now this is fascinating. I'm just going here with the best segues from what you've said so far into the next kind of thing. obviously you've mastered Blender to a great extent, or you wouldn't be teaching it, I hope. But one thing I happened to have been on the Drax Files podcast on Friday, where he was talking with Adam Frisbee, who's one of the CEOs of a world called Space, which is you author in Unity for that, but obviously things like meshes and stuff are often done in Blender, then go to Unity, then go up to Space, as it were. Same with High Fidelity. You might author in Blender and then export it in a format for High Fidelity or something. So one thing that got raised in my conversation there, I said it before, in fact, on this show, but I said it again, and it apparently proved how we should say, food for thought amongst those there, was that I feel that I have noticed an increasing trend now amongst, let's say, the serious creators, because unfortunately the price to be paid here is the amateur creator who learns to raise a prim and learns gradually from there. But an increasing tendency to view, both for copyright protection, in other words, knowing everything is your own, and other things, is to render offline and then deploy everywhere or deploy anywhere. You mentioned, for example, the entire landscape of the underwater area is simply a mesh that you've put way below the water of the normal world, the open sim world. I was playing around with a terrain generator I came across about a week ago too. Marvelous stuff, because you're not limited to the 4 textures that you have in OpenSim or Second Life. You can have different maps and height scales, and you can make one single mesh that is incredibly varied textures. But how do you on next week's show, we're probably going to have a chap called Fred Fredericks, or he's known in World as Ferd Fredericks. Sorry, his real name is Fred Bickhosen, who has, apart from taking over the a lot of Maria's Hyperica stuff, also has Outworlds, spelled with a Z, which is a sort of grid, but he provides this kind of variation on Sim on a Stick, where you can actually download an OpenSim installation onto your old, sorry, I got a message there, onto your hard disk. And you can run an offline region there. You can connect to the hypergrid if you want, and jump out and put a leap back driver on so you can jump back in and stuff if you want. But the whole idea there is you have a completely disconnected space, hardly a social virtual world, because you probably only get 2 or 3 avatars in. But it allows you the space to build whatever you want, really. It can be you can bring something in you've done in Mesh or something you do in Prims. And then because you're in your own space, you can pack it all up and export it. And you can use this as a kind of playground for creating stuff that eventually you might package up to put online in OpenSim proper, as it were, or equally sent to somewhere like a High Fidelity sandbox region or a region in space, or umpteen other Unity things. How do you feel? Do you see any trends that way, and have you yourself got any personal preferences for creating in that sense?
Well, the Ferd's work on the Sim on a Stick is just fantastic, and is great for helping to make it easier for people to get into the technology without a lot of technical know-how. He's just fantastic in developing that. And we're using that at the Spaceflight Museum. Once we complete all of our exhibits here in Kitely, we're going to package the museum up into an OR along with the Sim on a Stick, and distribute that to schools around the world for developing world, underdeveloped, you name it. Because we want schools to be able to provide a virtual platform for students to learn not just 3D modeling, virtual reality, and beginning programming, but to study space flight technologies, space history, and astronomy and things like that, and do so, they could do it in a school network, which would be safe from the rest of the world, so that they could keep the students under better management. And so we think that this is something where the museum can be a huge resource for educators around the world. So this is, this sort of technology has many, many applications, and I think that there's all sorts of ways to utilize it.
Yeah, I think so. I'd forgotten you'd actually mentioned that on our tour of the place. I mean, something that can easily be packaged up and publicly distributed, certainly has huge advantages. Because it can almost reside offline in 100 different places, and it's still the same thing without relying even on internet connectivity. Although I imagine most people have it anyway.
Yeah.
Right now, if I got a bit distracted there, that's okay. I finally got Jay Aboma replying to me, so I think he might be popping over to join us. So there might be some mutual interest there. When he gets here, I'll bring him in when he does. Right. Let me move on. I think to the IMA. We'll talk about the specific thing with the grid phone a bit later, but you're part of the IMA full stop, but also I gather you're on the specific commerce working group there. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and bring us any news on that front?
Sure. I've always, as people that know my history, I've always been a bit involved in commerce and building a commercial community, both in Second Life and now here in OpenSim. And so it's kind of natural for me to jump into that with the IMA. And what the Commerce Working Group is doing is we started the Hypergrid Chamber of Commerce G+ group that people can join on G+ to see what's going on and to help promote commerce in OpenSim. We are also working to develop standards for not just OpenSim, but for virtual worlds and virtual reality in general, for things dealing with intellectual property protection, as well as monetary systems for facilitating commerce, not just within grids, but across hypergrids, across the metaverse. And to have those standards so that you can rely on the fact that your money is your money, and you can rely on it being secure, and that your content is your content, and you can rely on that not being copy-botted easily, and that you have dispute resolution systems for protecting your work, and that don't need to necessarily involve high-priced lawyers and real-world courts and things like that.
Sure. Something that our viewers can't see, because we're very fussy about hiding our interface and stuff, here is you've got actually a tag over your head saying Globit user. I presume you are. I know that we've had. I forgot his name. Colosi, Christopher Colosi, isn't it? Yeah. We've had Chris on the program some months ago now, but I gathered that the Globit currency is kind of taking off, and of course one of the intentions there is that it's a interoperative transaction system. Now, from what you told me of your history with Second Life, this is something, money transfers and exchanges and all this side of stuff is something that you would really fall quite naturally into. Do you think Chris is onto the right thing with Globit? So,
I think so. And actually, until he announced it at the OSCC last fall, I had actually been considering introducing something like this into the market, but he came out, so I was very happy to see that, and I think that letting him run with it, he's got a fantastic reputation from running the Lindex, and so I think he's the right person for that particular task. And I've got my main store on the Kitely marketplace, but I also have 5 stores for hypersonic systems on different grids that use Globit, and it's not as big of an economy yet compared to the Kitely marketplace, but it's growing, and I think it's going to have a significant place for people in the metaverse. And the cool thing with Globit is it can expand beyond just OpenSim to any sort of virtual world, virtual reality, or game platform that wants to utilize it. So it's got some really tremendous potential.
Okay. Well, I'm pleased to say that while all that's going on, Joey has arrived somewhere, but I can't see him. I think he must be downstairs, and he's not on my radar. Sorry, I shouldn't be doing this live on air, but it's going to be good to get him up here. So I'm just seeing if I can locate him. He's definitely in the region somewhere, but he's not showing up on my what's it.
Yeah, I'm not seeing him yet either.
You're not seeing him either, right? Okay, we'll have to ad-lib this. I'd like. I think it'd be very useful if we hold off on talking about the grid phone until he's here too, because I think there'll be some common interest to be shared on this. And of course, he was with me on Friday on the space show as well. Right, I need to. Have you got any questions for Mike James whilst I'm sort of just going down my list here, trying to patch things together?
I was looking also here. Well, I'm very interested in the. I love the Star Wars build. I think that's really fun. I wish I'd been able to be with the hypergrid when we went to see the space station. I mean the space exhibit. And I think all my questions would be about the phone because, well. So maybe a question to lead into the phone when we start talking about that is, because Mel and I both do screen capture recording and things like that. Just curious if there are any provisions that would help people doing recording of virtual worlds and having that be part of the audio system.
That's something we're looking at, and the first generation the first module that'll be going out on the market will be strictly focusing on providing chat communications across the world, and that'll you'll be able to log your chat if you wish, and on the server, and so you'll be able to recover any transcripts that you want. But at the same time, we're working on the second generation, which will include the ability to do voice. And so we are going to have an SDK for the platform so that there can be third-party apps developed. And we'll have an app store on our website so people can sell the apps.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of potential. It's we're really going at it with a model of being a virtual smartphone.
Sure. That provisions for it. How do you think something like that would integrate with? This whole phenomenon that's exemplified by Twitch, and I think both Xbox and Sony have similar types of systems where people are broadcasting their gameplay and recording it and developing audiences. And how much do you think an audio system would integrate with something like that?
There's great potential for that because there's a lot of common standards now. In the older days, it was, a lot of proprietary standards, but a lot of those patents have expired, so it's a lot easier to use these that are now public domain standards to share data between different platforms. The big reason we're doing this is because of the growing number of walled gardens that we're seeing in both gaming and virtual reality, virtual worlds. And I think that really making everyone dependent upon having a company in control of their data is counterproductive to their rights as individuals. I mean, you've got your rights to free, and I don't care what country you're in, your government may not recognize your right to free speech, but I'm very much a libertarian individual, and so I believe strongly in individual rights as a universally objective, valid fact of among all sapient beings. And so I think that having proprietary services being able to control your data and not letting you use it or to communicate outside of their own platform is really against and not in your own best interest.
Yeah.
And so, one of the motivations behind developing the grid phone is really to tear down the walled gardens. I'm kind of like, the model that I took when I first started this is I wanted to tear down the walled garden around Second Life. And I figured that a lot of people say that the fax machine destroyed the Soviet Union.
Oh.
And because it enabled the dissidents, the samizdat dissidents, to share their samizdat newsletters after hours by breaking into offices and using their fax machines to spread them around the Soviet Union to tell people what was really going on.
Oh, wow.
And that got around the government propaganda outlets, and that led to the fall of the Soviet Union. And so I figured that if the fax machine can do that for fighting communism, that the grid phone can help tear down a lot of these walled gardens and help liberate people and their information from these proprietary closed systems.
Wow. Oh, Mal, you back?
Yes, sorry. I'm just going to check, but I think we can finally welcome Joey, your son, to the call. So are you there, Joey?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, can hear you absolutely fine. Well, glad you could actually make it. I was recounting earlier about the little fight we had in space on the Dratster show. I think that went down rather well, didn't it?
Yeah, I think we showed them the art of war in space.
Yeah, fighting is not my thing, but it was fun to watch, I've got to admit. Yep. Great animations. Okay, well, welcome to the show. I'll just do a quick intro here. First of all, I believe you probably know Mike Lorrey already. You've probably seen him at some of the IMA meetings. You've been at IMA meetings, haven't you, Joey?
I don't know if I have.
Oh, okay. I don't know why.
The last couple of years I've been working at school. I was going to school at the Art Institute, and then my house got hit by Hurricane Matthew. So I've been kind of out of things for a few months here. And then once I recovered from that, the folks at Space reached out to me to see if I could help them with developing their virtual world capability as well.
Right, sure. Okay, I may be mistaken there then. I think, or have you been involved with Moses?
Yeah, Project Moses. I was involved with Doug Maxwell since probably pretty close to day one. I've been down to Orlando and took a tour of their facilities. Also did some of their training and stuff like that as well. I was also using their Edge technology for a while as well.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that's good. That explains my confusion because some of the OpenSim meetings, Moses meetings, have been happening kind of concurrently and merging into the IMA ones recently. So I've probably seen you at the Moses one.
Yeah. Oh, I remember the IMA one now. Yeah, that's the one that they're working on as the thing after Moses, possibly, if I understand right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Barbara, of course.
Sorry, I was trying to remember what the acronym stood for.
It's Infinite Metaverse Alliance. And,
that's Myron and the one guy from Arizona.
Yes.
I know the folks. I just can't remember their names off the top of my head.
Yeah, exactly. So there's been a bit of collision there. Yeah. Well, basically, Mike here is also part of that. He's in the commerce working group.
Okay.
There, and we've also been I've held off talking about something new called the grid phone that he's working on, because that has we've talked a bit about globits and currencies that transcend any individual platform, as it were.
Yeah.
And
I've also worked. By the way, I did a college course for Rasmussen College on engineering virtual worlds. I created an undergrad program for him. And one of the things we did there is we looked at a lot of the different aspects, including virtual world currency. For that, I had Chris Collins on as part of it as well. He went through what it was like when they were working with the SL Exchange and things like that. So I've got a pretty broad base of experience across multiple areas in the virtual communities as well.
Okay, well, I'll summarize what Mike has said so far. He runs on the Kitely grid, and there's a smaller version in Second Life, the International Space Flight Museum. Okay. He also has on Kitely some Star Trek regions of his own. He also teaches Blender. He does regular classes on Kitely, and he has some experience. Here's the click point with Unity, which I was talking about in passing because of space, obviously. And I was also telling him, as in fact we mentioned on the Drax show, the idea of among serious creators at least, the idea of working offline, in whether it's in a world or in a program like Unity, creating offline, it's all yours, and you build it once and then deploy anywhere, or indeed everywhere. And Mike was actually saying that with the Spaceflight Museum, for example, there is an obvious thing there where when it's finished, they can actually literally package it up and give it out to educational institutions all over the place for free or whatever. And because it would be a package, it would be up to them where they deploy it, presumably on their website or in their own virtual world, or indeed on somewhere on the hypergrid or in space anyway. But
or giving them some on a stick, so that students can walk away with it and use it at home as well.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. Now, we'll move into more stuff about space and using Unity in a bit. But one of the other things that I haven't moved into yet, although James did ask a little bit about it while I was pulling you in, is that Mike is also working on something called a grid phone. And as I understand it, this it may sound like a phone that connects grids, and I've no doubt it is, but it is much more in the sense that it would hopefully ultimately be platform agnostic. So maybe
kind of like an internet relay chat room, or what?
Well, I think that is the cue to get Mike to tell us more about the grid phone. Obviously, there'll be different versions. There'll be a version 1 that does so much, and then version 2 and stuff. But over to you, Mike. Maybe you'd like to elaborate on this.
Okay, well, my first experience with multi-platform broadcast was in Second Life in a couple different areas. One was I would be on the Metaverse show with Robert Bloomfield, and we'd broadcast to different worlds at the same time. But also I had some tenants, some sim renters who were combat role play types who would had a pretty good sized community there in Second Life, but they also like to go to play other games, and they would have. They would use Ventrilo or Skype or other types of third-party communications apps so that they could stay in touch no matter what world they were in. And I always thought that those third-party apps seem to be have a very big footprint, both in the memory and processor usage, and it would detract from your performance in world. And so it'd bring down your frame rate and mess up your physics and response times and so forth. And so, plus the fact that it distracts you having to go back and forth between the viewer and the chat app.
Yeah, it's nice to have an integrated approach.
Right. So I thought that, if we're going to have something, it really needs to have something where you're in the immersive environment, interacting with the device. And so we were creating both a HUD for the avatar to wear that looks like a virtual smartphone, and then we've got a conference model for people to do their conference meetings. Like we could have something here or any sort of group meeting where you have groups in different places, and you want to be able to share the communications. And so the this is going to allow people to not just share chat in the first generation and have an SDK to develop apps to run on our platform and interact in any world. We want to basically provide this service so that it's platform agnostic. And so we're going to start off in bridging between Second Life and OpenSim, but we're going to go beyond that into High Fidelity and Unity and Unreal and whatever other VR platforms are out there, as well as some AR platforms and even interacting with people in reality. And for instance, I did a test recently of our web chat feature while I was going to a conference in New York City, and I couldn't catch any airplanes out of my area because I live next to Dartmouth College and all the students were getting out of school, so all the flights were booked. Oh. So I wind up getting the last Greyhound bus ticket out of town. And so I'm riding this bus, and it's not even the express bus. It's the slow town to town.
Slow boat to China, yes.
Yeah, and going to Boston and then New York. So I'm riding on this bus, and they thankfully have Wi-Fi. And I'm on my smartphone, my real-life smartphone, and I bring up a web browser, and I use my web chat there, and I've got the grid phone at the Kitely's weekly community meeting at their Welcome Center. And so I was able to attend their community meeting and interact with everybody there just from this phone while I'm traveling the roads and on the back roads of northern New England. And so it was a really nice test of the robustness of our system versus previous types of chat bridging software out there, which tend to really break communications very easily. So we started making a lot of different ways to share the chat across different channels, because we found that there's so many different ways that people can, just in OpenSim itself, to screw up their settings on their INI file to make certain script functions not work right. And people who know me from the OpenSim dev meetings know how much I've ranted about certain grids not having their allowing certain LSL functions to work for scripts. And so we finally said, forget it. We're going to make every possible way that two avatars can communicate, so that if one doesn't work, the system's automatically going to pick any other way until it establishes contact, and then it's going to keep that contact as solid as possible, so that with our system, it's so robust that any grid or virtual world operator is going to really have to nerf their own system so badly to keep their users from communicating that their own platform is going to be unusable.
And so, is your phone system a proprietary one, or is it a open source one?
It's proprietary, but we're producing an open SDK for developers to create their own apps, and they can make those apps open, or they can sell them on our app store and that sort of thing. And so once we do that, we're going to be getting the server network up. And one of the things that we found with the difference between doing something open and versus something proprietary is that when you have something open and anybody can make any kind of version they want, you very quickly run into a situation where things aren't compatible. And this is an increasing problem in OpenSim. And so, at least for the time being, we're going to be keeping it the core code proprietary, simply so that we can keep one version common to all users, because it's important to us. Our goal is to make sure the communications is reliable across all platforms. And so, it's kind of a trade-off of, what's more important to having an open society? Is it more important to have the code open and that winds up branching out into a Tower of Babel situation of tons of incompatible code? Or is it more important that you have open communication so that everyone can communicate openly with each other? And so I'm taking the latter approach to that. I think that it's more important, at least in this particular niche, for people to be able to have open communications is more important for the users than it is for developers to be able to tweak code however they want.
I kind of like it. This is like a double plugin, isn't it? Really, where you've got like an advanced switchboard system, which itself plugs into different worlds and grids, and delivered, and that is proprietary, but delivered via that, there will be, as you say, people make apps that plug into it itself. So you'll have some things that are free, because people want to bring out free things to plug in with your SDK, and other people might bring out other proprietary systems that they'll plug into your proprietary system. But so long as it's an open switchboard,
right, and we're always going to offer free service for the core chat code, so that people that we're not going to be excluding people. Because I'm a libertarian, I don't feel that it's my job to limit other people's freedom of speech. So we're not going to be limiting what or trying to restrict what people do with our technology as users. And so we want people to be able to have free access. So we're going to have a freemium model that'll be ad supported. And so if you want to get rid of the ads, you can buy a subscription. If you want to have advanced features, you can buy a subscription. But there's going to be lots of apps available for free and so forth. So, it's kind of a hybrid model that we're going by.
Yeah, it sounds like some of the things you're focusing on are basically standards kind of issues, like what the IEEE has been looking at. I was involved in the early days with it, but I'm not sure where it's at this point. They had a standards group for the IEEE that was looking at standards for virtual worlds. One of the things that had come up in topic at times with it was, were we too early for standards? Because sometimes if you try to lock in the standards too early in the technology cycle, it can limit the application of the technology. It's like putting the cart before the horse, more or less.
Right.
That was one thing. I'm not sure how far along that got. I know there was another group before the IEEE, I forget their name, but that was trying to get there. Personally, I've looked at this stuff for more than a decade now. I really think we need to get to a point where the WWWC is actually part of this, having the consortium as part of the future of the metaverse. And I think that's where we're really going to get to the point of it being integrated once we are in a web browser, not just as an add-in, but as part of the actual web technologies. But it's going to take us a while to get there. But some of these concerns you're talking about, having it open and freely usable for both open source as well as proprietary solutions to be able to plug into, by having standards in place that make it easier for those things to basically plug and play. That's what we really want to get it to.
I'm reminded, taking a more simplistic approach that I will, of the big difference, I guess, in Second Life when media on the prim came in, or the ways of using media in the world. That people were designing devices that allowed you to port PowerPoint things into a screen in Second Life. And then, of course, if the web was on the prim, you could actually log into that page and, view your calendar and do stuff like that. The limitation, of course, was the implementation in Second Life largely meant the media on the prim was locked to the individual user. In other words, you couldn't, share a workspace unless it was a special sharing site with other people. But, pardon me, coughing a bit. But it kind of opened up, to me, the first possibilities of seeing the virtual world as it was, but also seeing ways of putting things into the virtual environment which are actually effectively scripted or operating from a web back end. And I look at something like Space Now, which you can access via a web page or a bed or via a dedicated viewer. And that in itself is great. But if you, let's say Space wasn't available on the web. Thank goodness it is, but just think of it if it wasn't. The idea that you could still have things in that environment that would communicate out to a sort of standard web backend. And when you're talking about the web consortium, I mean that is really stepping into their area of expertise. So I can see very good reasons why. My argument is always that we are moving from the desktop metaphor into a spatial metaphor. I'm not. People know my thoughts on helmets, and I don't think they're going to become publicly ubiquitous in living rooms that quickly, unless it's hardcore gamers.
But there's a very small audience in that right now, and that's the hard thing. I mean, you're probably talking less than 1,000 people that have those devices at the level that can use it like that. So catering to that crowd, it has some future application, but it's also people that are only going to be wearing it on their head for like 15 to 30 minutes at a time.
Well, the only thing I've got in this department is a Google Cardboard, albeit a plastic one. And
I have the PlayStation VR myself.
Yeah, but I mean, even that cardboard thing, I watched something that was about 7 minutes. The phone started overheating. I would try something else. And it's, I don't know, for about a year now, it's just been gathering dust on the shelf by me here. I mean, when the novelty wears off, that cumbersomeness is not particularly effective. And when I'm talking about these web backends and things like that, I mean, the important thing is the space itself, whether it's on the mobile, whether it's on a flat screen, whether it's in a visor of some sort. I mean, the thing, the different ways of accessing a virtual world are a separate strand from having decent interoperating virtual worlds themselves. I'm more than happy to look on the 2D screen here. And hell, I can use my camera to pan around 360. So it's not really, I don't really need to have a helmet on. Or, I'll be sweating under it and getting frustrated.
I think Google Glass had a really good approach to it. And you're seeing a similar thing right now with Microsoft HoloLens. And that is our ability to look through the technology at other people. So instead of us turning our backs away from each other and stopping to communicate at the basic level that we've done since the beginning of time, we go back to that, but now we have technology as an aid between us. And what it does is it turns on the metaverse all around us. So we can interoperate. The data streams are all around us everywhere we go, and we can interact with them. And like, for example, I've seen one where Microsoft is working on for the HoloLens, where it's a pair of what I'd call BC glasses. It's an acronym we used in the Navy. We call them birth control glasses because they look so ugly. But it's just these really simple, like Clark Kent glasses that you wear. And, you're able to look through them. And what they're trying to do is bring down the cost, but also bring down the interface. So if you don't have, like, for example, if you want real immersion, the less stuff you have on the screen, the better. Because then you're not focused on buttons. You don't feel like you're playing a game. You feel like you're actually in a place, an environment. So it's the same kind of thing. If we lessen the hardware, we make it part of mainstream life. Now people can just go in and use the technology. And now it becomes an aid. If we take a look at like artificial intelligence, for a long time it got a really bad rap. And I think a lot of it was because of, unfortunately, Turing's approach was kind of, the fool the eye type of approach on things. And, can we make it seem like it's a human being so we can trick you? And people didn't like that, and they turned against it. And there was a domino effect on that. But the thing is, once we started to see artificial intelligence, and unfortunately we had to kind of change the name of it to get there, but once we started to see artificial intelligence as something helping us, then it became different. So, you see elderly people now that have robot dogs in their house that clean the carpets for them. Yeah. It's something that is making their lives better. And that's when the technology, it's not just about having great technology. It's not just about having a great virtual environment, but it's about having one that synergizes well with the audience.
I agree. I've got a lot of friends who say, you've got gadgets and technology. You're obsessed with it. Go get a life.
Yeah.
I do make a point of trying to say that I pass on a whole load of technology because it's no use to me. I only go for the stuff that makes my life better. I think that's the key. When people see something I know people that come into virtual worlds, and I think I mentioned it on the drag show on Friday. A friend of mine who never uses these things, but she came into Second Life once. I think it was Second Life, might have been OpenSim, and pottering around, and I can move this. I can move myself around and look at all these fancy-looking cartoons around me and everything else like that. And then at some point, she clicked that she was the center of focus in a room full of where the avatars were actually real people. And she freaked, logged out of here, because she suddenly realized she was the center of attention with a load of real people. And
well, that's kind of like the same thing.
She couldn't make the psychological jump from the cartoon persona representation to the fact, oh, blimey, they have real people.
Yeah. That's kind of like one I saw with a small child that was at Disney World. And the child had this mortified look when Mickey Mouse came up to her. And, it was a person in a costume. Yeah. And she realized that the Mickey was a costume character and not real. It was like it somehow changes your mindset of what is reality and what is not. And when that happens, for some people, they just throw up the defense mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah, and for other people, they don't. It just comes naturally. It's just a quick hurdle, and you think, "Oh, wow, this is even more fantastic than we thought."
Yeah,
yeah, and absolutely. Let's move into a bit more into the field of I was talking about web backends here and stuff like that, interoperability, because in your different ways. This is something I'm very keen on, but you both have a bit more expertise in the common area. Something like the grid phone, is basically something that makes worlds and spaces interoperate, regardless of the platform. Mm-hmm. And within the platforms themselves, we can build things that operate independently, even though they're sort of in situ in the virtual world platform. I can build a studio for shows like something like this, just a little stage, some seats and stuff like that. I can build it offline, hopefully, using mesh and make it slicker and slicker without overdoing it. And then I can package it up in such a way that it could be deployed in a lot of different places. When I deploy it, however, really, I am putting a copy of the same build on a lot of different platforms. And that does not make them connected. It just means that the camera might be filming in space one week and in OpenSim another week, Hyperdesk the other week, and there's a commonality of the look. Assuming I can ever get my avatar converted. But
I'm working on a version of you, by the way.
Oh, wonderful. But that aside, if that object that I can deploy anywhere has interoperability built into it, so that wherever it's deployed, it can connect with its duplicates on whatever platform they're on, then this starts to open up a whole new arena. I could have a studio or a house or something, and I could have copies in a lot of different worlds, which are independent of each other. But when you actually enter the object that is the house and all the component objects inside it, it will fire up communication systems that effectively put you in every other duplicate of the house at the same time. I'm not talking about the sharding process that Adam has talked about in space, where you can, you could have an audience of 5,000 by sharding. I'm actually talking about an object that has built-in communication systems that are a bit like the Doctor Who TARDIS, where it can sort of be present in multiple places at the same time. And although the instances are different, once you move inside the instance, they become the same. How possible, both of you really, in turn, do you think that? Because the the grid phone implies slight moves in that kind of direction. The stuff Adam talks about and about in, say, space imply things like that are possible. How do you think this is going to pan out? Or if this because equally that house might not be in a strict virtual world, it might be on a web page and still be.
Oh, absolutely. And we could have you could have NPC copies of yourself on many different platforms, each of which could be wearing a grid phone to relay your chat or voice to the local audience. So even though you may not be personally logged in through your viewer there, if everybody there has a NPC generator projecting their NPC and as basically copying however they're animated, wherever they really are, you can essentially have sort of script-driven cloning. And so therefore, I could be in Kitely Grid, you could have a studio over there, but you would be present in your studio here, and it would be kind of like a sort of a holographic projection with NPCs, and using technology like the grid phone to share the communications. And so I could be there and experience interacting with you. I could see your NPC animated the same way you're being animated, and so on and so forth. So there's a tremendous amount of potential to utilizing those sort of tools. It's just a matter of each platform having the capability of doing those sorts of things to be able to spread that.
So do you think that is a proprietary support structure that would be involved in that, or?
Well, I think it would depend, wouldn't it? Because if you think of the back end as, say, certainly the internet, but even the web, you have protocols in play there, and for better or worse, people have built proprietary systems that run on top of not just the internet, but web browsers. But there's also a whole load of open source stuff out there. So I think the answer to that is systems like that could, if necessary, be proprietary, but I think more often they would probably run on public code and accepted standards. It's one of the things the metaverse has always been missing, because we are the web of spaces, and but there are no protocols that define us the way Tim Berners-Lee's protocols define the way the web works, but the web is resting on top of the internet. But there are common protocols, which is what made the web take off. Things are done on the web now that it was never designed to do. Commerce got involved, and the web is no longer what the web was. But people were able to take an extended list of common open source or given away protocols and build on those with many things that are now proprietary. But the underlying system has a commonality that allows them to connect. And, at the moment, you take OpenSim, Second Life, Space, High Fidelity, VR Chat, all these things are out there. They are not being built by developers who are building on any kind of common protocol. And if you start raising the issues of common protocol with them, they start saying, "Oh, well, we've gone too far. You're talking about something deep down there on the ground. It's like laying new foundations underneath the building we've already done." Whereas with the web, it's the other way around. The web itself had the foundations, and the buildings came on top.
Well, see, that's where we took a slightly different approach, I think, from a lot of the other technologies. I mean, if you take a look at, for example, at Second Life and Open Simulator and some of the others, they're going out and they're trying to emulate the things that are already being done in the gaming world. So they're trying to copy things, and that puts them usually about a decade behind in the state of their technology. As you saw, it took a long time for level of detail. It took a long time for mesh. It took a long time for a lot of things. And the browser had like everything turned on when you'd come into it. So it would take so long to load things that your browsers would crash. You could only have so many people in a region at a time. You'd run into issues with your interoperability, your accessibility. That's where we wanted to go. Instead of reinventing the wheel, we decided to look at the ones that are already doing things right. And, the two biggest technologies in the gaming area, that have a pretty massive market approach are the Unity 3D engine as well as the Unreal Engine. And of the two, the Unity engine seemed to have the easiest pathway and probably the best opportunities for the future, because they were synergizing with a lot of the software companies like Autodesk and Adobe and things like that as well. So they were positioning themselves in the market and they were game changers. They were changing the way that people looked at using the technology. I mean, you're talking just about maybe less than a half dozen years ago that Unity went to the point where they basically just exploded. They went out instead of, their number of people, they have over 6 million game designers right now that are using that engine. So
I think they very cleverly, I think others have followed suit, but if I'm right, they were the first to make the engine itself free.
Yes, they were. And then Unreal followed suit. Yeah. But even companies like Autodesk have taken concepts that they've used in their engine and started to integrate it into their software. So like, for example, I use Maya, and Maya now has elements with the cube and things like that it didn't earlier on because it was first seen in the gaming industry. And also these software companies are also making it so that you can export out from their software directly into the game engines. Yeah. So they've really changed the way that we do gaming. And a lot of it, I think, got down to the point where you started to see small indie game developers competing with the big boys, taking on companies like Electronic Arts, EA Games. I used to work for a company that made a number of popular titles on Electronic Arts gaming side, but also things changed because as people went to consoles, they weren't so interested in things that were PC platform games. So what the indie game developers do is they go to that direction, and now they can still develop the way that they want to, and they don't have to have the big gaming companies to publish for them because they can self-publish instead.
Sure. And it's the app revolution as well. I know I've got stuff on my iPad that is, I think I've got some things done in Unity. They're not spectacular 3D things, but, especially with Apple, but it's, others, the Unreal Engine, and there's another one I'm trying to
Unreal's good, but it's got a lot to learn. Yeah. It's a much steeper learning path with it. And that's what
we see that Unity is really the big kahuna in the market because when we're looking at market size, it looks like that Unity is around 40% of the mobile gaming market right now, and it's about 20 to 25% of the PC games. So it's really taking on the entire industry and enabling people that want to be independent developers to really have a much lower barrier to entry into the marketplace. And we're seeing that as once we move beyond the SL and OpenSim markets and into Hi-Fi, that Unity is really where we're going to see the most growth and get the most profit by unifying networks and developing value in our company based upon that unification.
Mike, you mentioned when we were talking about the grid phone that you've been looking at Hyperfidelity and other stuff, and you did mention not space, but you mentioned Unity specifically. Have you done any of the development work? Sorry, I'm coughing here. I'm mad. It's the heat. Have you done any kind of actual development work for that or any similar system using Unity? I mean, I know, for example, that when you're preparing stuff in Unity to export to sine wave space, they provide a plugin that goes into Unity and it gives you a particular menu for things that, help you make stuff and export stuff into their platform. And there are loads of other plugins in Unity and stuff. So presumably, at a later, when it's developed down the line a bit, something like your grid phone could be a kind of plugin in Unity, as it were, so that you will be able to provide tools to people that they kind of drag and drop as assets into Unity and then deploy in whatever they're building, and then that just fits into your whole system.
Oh, yes. The great thing about having the ability to both do communications as well as media is that we're, with our app store, is not just going to sell apps that operate on our phone platform, but also be a 3D content marketplace, so that you'll be able to shop there for content, not just for the platform you're on, but for any other platform that you may want to send content to. So you could, be in sine wave space and be shopping for something and say, hey, that looks pretty good. I want it for my Second Life avatar. And you could buy it and have it delivered to your Second Life avatar from within the space platform. And, so you could use this to do any sort of inter-platform commerce that you want to do.
Yeah. But one of the things that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I'll just start a technical point there. I mean, there are, we're back to this deploy offline thing. Deploy anywhere, work offline. There are so many content variations. For example, if Joey recreates this avatar of mine, for example, by Unity into space, it'd be converted from a standard avatar wearing prim clothes into one big mesh. That's the way it works, and that's cool because I don't have to, even less work to change my costume. Just don't do it. I never do anyway. But obviously, if I import that avatar into High Fidelity and then import it into space and maybe import the mesh version back into OpenSim, the exact format is going to be slightly different. So if you have a marketplace that can, and I do know too, I can also see slide obstacles where you've got, obviously these platforms aren't, parts of them are proprietary because they can't all work for big operations for free,
Right.
Unlike OpenSim where a lot is free and it's, a lot of it's open source and community driven. So I know from talking to Adam, for example, that the marketplace for virtual goods in space is something that obviously the creators will do in Unity and they'll upload them to their store, but control of that marketplace and making commissions on it and stuff like that will be an integral part of their business model. And likewise, I'm sure Linden Labs are going to do the same with Sansar. They already do it with Second Life. It's a walled garden. And the format is also kind of slightly different. So whether you could ever get a system where somebody could go via your system to the Kiteler market, get an object.
Some have done that already. Yeah. Some have done that already. We did that with our motion capture from Sine Wave Entertainment. We were selling that in Second Life. We were selling it in OpenSim. We were selling it in IMView. Also, when I used to work with Tessa Harrington in Spot On 3D, she had technology that allowed you to buy an outfit both in Second Life and OpenSim at the same time, so that you would go to a website and it would give you both versions of it, once you paid for it. And I mean, these things are all possible. It's just a matter of some of these things, like you're saying, are kind of walled gardens. I think where the power is going to come in the future is as we open that thing up so that people like to have a continuity of things between worlds. So one of the things I liked with Kitely's marketplace is my ability to go in there, and this outfit I'm wearing right now was one that I purchased on the Kitely marketplace, but it allowed me to either buy a version that was just for Kitely or a version that I could use at any hypergrid location. Yeah. You pay more for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and equally, I could have bought the same costume off the Kitely marketplace and bought a version that was only for Canada. Yeah. Because they control that whole delivery system. On OpenSim it's easy because of the hypergrid.
But let's take it a step further than that. What about the real world? What about actually selling goods? That's been the kind of hard nut to crack. I mean, we had a lot of companies that came into Second Life in the early days, 2006, 2007 especially, that thought this might have been the perfect place for them to get folks synergized and looking at their products, and that this would actually lead to them buying things. But it never fully got.
We were working on that.
Yeah. One of the things that I was looking at, one of the things that I was looking at, and we had a 3D web panel that was going down this path a little, but we ended up sidelining it for a bit, but I would like to re-engage it at some point in the future. Once the Kitely marketplace came into being, because I didn't want to do a direct head-on competition with that at the point. But what if we take it to the point where not only can you buy it for your avatar in this virtual environment, in that virtual environment, but what if you can buy it for yourself in real world? And
well,
what
that has, I mean, there is, and it's not, it doesn't come up as much as I think it should, but there is actually a very interesting, it's not huge, but it's a very interesting, real practical industry there already with fashion. Mm-hmm. You have fashion designers in the real world who use virtual worlds to prototype. You also have fashion designers who've learned to do it the whole way Inworld, who actually get work out of world because of their ability to design things.
Yeah, like
so
there's
the
one
crossover is already happening.
There's one that is a real life fashion designer in Canada, and she came into Second Life and made stores where she was making virtual versions of her items. But you could buy both versions. But it was kind of a niche market. Not a lot of folks, and there wasn't like a lot of linkage between you buy this one, you get that one kind of a deal. But, you know, that stuff is all possible. And what I was talking about with this thing that I called MUM, it was going to be the Metaverse Universal Marketplace. And we're looking at the capability to basically set up scanners, body scanners, that could be set up in places like maybe along beach areas. We have college students and things like that because they'd probably be the most receptive to it initially, like maybe Florida, San Diego, San Francisco, some of the places that would be more receptive to the technology. Have people come in and get a body scan done of themselves that virtualizes them. Okay.
Well,
and then you'd also have your avatar virtualized because you've already got the assets. Go into a storefront that automatically puts you inside of the clothing, and you can see yourself online before you hit that pay button.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you were watching the High Fidelity broadcast a couple of weeks ago, where Philip actually was the interviewer for once, and he was interviewing Robert Scoble, and Scoble had literally 2 days beforehand. Apparently, there was a place in Dusseldorf and another place in New York. So he probably, unless he lives in New York, he would have a lot of traveling to do. But he actually went somewhere to this company that's linked with High Fidelity, and he walked in, everything was scanned, and you had a totally lifelike Robert Scoble. You would recognize him from a photo on the web or anything in High Fidelity. Some people were very critical of it. They felt that it might have been better if it was a bit more idealized.
Well, there's that, and then the other thing you have to remember is it's not just about the mesh; it's also about the movement. So if you're just a static, it creeps people out. If you have some motion and animation overrider that makes it feel like you, now you've got life. With 3D, if it's not moving, it's dead. When somebody sees something that looks super realistic and it's dead, it looks creepy.
Well, I when I was with the Drax Files with you son on Friday, you know, I had a default avatar, and I think the first thing I said is, by the way, folks, this isn't my real avatar. But when you gave me those animations, and Drax saw us performing.
All of a sudden, Drax is all into it.
Yeah. Keep doing that. I've got something to film, you know. But I was actually looking at that, and although I really didn't like my avatar because it was a bit mundane looking, some of those motions made me think, God, you know, it's 40 years since I could do those kind of acrobatics, you know, and they look real. So I wasn't, you know, I was amazed by that stuff. It almost made me forget how awful my avatar was because it was performing so well. You know, so movement and, you know, that's all that is so much part of it. I think there are issues as to which I would call too much immersion sometimes. It's like another criticism of headsets I have is the fact that if I've got full immersion, there's actually there was I think I thought of this first, but there was a lovely viral YouTube clip which lasted about 2 minutes. So a guy puts his 3D headset on and goes and wows himself in some 3D game, and it's got a picture-in-picture camera. showing that in the course of 2 minutes, some burglars come in through his window. He can't hear them. They nick all the furniture in the room. He can't hear them take it away. He can't see them. He takes his helmet off after this game and goes, "Wow, that was great." And then he looks around the house. And nothing left, you know. I rather like the idea of being able to hear somebody intrude in my real world space.
That sounds kind of like that meme about Second Life where it's saying that, you know, you're spending all this time in Second Life, you take the headset off and your first life is gone, you know? Yeah.
If you ever have one.
Or if you lost the landmark.
Yeah, I lost my landmark to the real world sim. Yeah, I love it. I think some people probably do. Yeah.
So a point that you were making earlier, Mal, as far as like replicating spaces between worlds, okay? The one thing I think there is, I mean, we don't do all these virtual worlds so that we can have copies of everything everywhere. Sometimes people want to be able to take their content, especially, for example, with educators. Educators are looking to do things on a slim dime, you know, so we're trying to find ways to empower them to get more out of their money. And yeah, eventually they end up spending money because they see the viability of the platform, but we want to, you know, help them to do the best that they can with their budgets. And one of the things like that we saw is, like, for example, the oil rig that was done by the University of Edinburgh. Professor Austin Tate had pulled that stuff over from his OpenSim environment and brought it from that grid as an OR file into Unity and into space, and then he deployed it there as well. But the thing is with this is you're bringing assets that were optimized for that use, and you're bringing it over and bringing it for another platform. But a lot of times what you want to do, and like, for example, you've been working on bringing your stages over, and that's great. But once you bring it over to a new environment, you might not want it exactly the same because you might have certain things in the new environment that are even better. And why not make use of those better aspects of it? And I think that's like, it's a starting point, but take the starting point and build upon it and show off what the new capability is.
Yeah. I mean, if this studio is replicated on 5 different platforms right now, and we were all being seen on each of those 5 platforms, and the camera in each platform wouldn't know the difference, as it were, that would be one thing. But if I res a prim in front of me in OpenSim, that's not going to be replicated on the other platforms because the technology I'm using is unique to this one. Mm-hmm. Likewise, if I'm in space,
well, you could actually export a prim out and then bring it into
but no, it wouldn't be
the world as a furniture item.
I know, but it wouldn't be real time, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
And likewise, if we were filming now in space, I'd be doing my best to shut up and let you two do the talking while I was fiddling with the lights, because I could do lighting all over the place, which isn't possible here. You can do it with other tricks, but, you know, I'm talking about basic structures, you know, in the same way I want my avatar to be the same everywhere. And he can even wear the same costume all the while for all I care, because I never get changed, you know. I would like the idea that I have certain things that actually are available everywhere. And of course, when I upload and deploy to different spaces, the chances my master file is going to go through some kind of conversion process to be rendered in that other space. And that other space, once it's rendered, may offer extra facilities that aren't available everywhere I've replicated. But to me, those are just plus points. I mean, you know, I'm talking about like a basic stage, logo behind us. Maybe forget about that dripping effect behind us. The style of the seats, the look of our avatars. If that could coexist simultaneously as a self-enclosed space in a space in different platforms, that initially is enough. On the individual platforms, I would then maybe choose to enhance, you know, or whatever. But the main thing is the scripting, the interior of that model you've uploaded does as much as it can to be the same thing. And that's not everybody's cup of tea. Some people want a totally different house in every world they're in. Other people might want an identical luxury house in each world that they can hop around like a TARDIS. but each world will offer independent different things on top of the basics. But for example, if I want my grid phone system to be fully operational, it will be preferable to me to have that embedded in the actual object I'm deploying in several different places, because that will be one element that can come in and work in all those places and work the same, despite the fact that there will be different platforms will offer different things to enhance the environment in that particular platform. But it's just a level at which you say, I want everything the same up to this point, and then I want to tweak it a little bit in each different platform accordingly. And, that's obviously when I talk about these things, I can't help but be thinking of what I want to do. I mean, but let's say I'm educational and I want to recreate, some long lost city in the Middle East or somewhere that's long since destroyed. It's just a ruin. I rebuild it with mesh or various tools to get it absolutely perfect reconstruction. And I make it available for visitors to have a history tour, walk around a recreation of a building, right? Now, it may be in my interest to deploy that recreation on every available social platform so that people can visit me and visit that recreation. And therefore, the building doesn't need to be essentially different on the different platforms. But, if I'm running, a number of different live events or something, which are of different characters, then it may be desirable that, I might be doing a show that involves effects that are unique to space. So I will want to film it in space. Another one where I'm going to want to res objects in real time. And so I will use OpenSim, as it were. So I can res, something on the floor here in real time in front of the camera. So there are different swings and roundabouts. There are different facilities offered by the different platforms. And in that case, 2 different shows will be geared to 2 different platforms. But especially in education, and here I love historical builds or recreations and things. I can actually see, the need to put a lot of work into that reconstruction and then having it available to put on a web world or on any other given kind of platform. I've shut everybody out now, haven't I? Thoughts?
No, it's fine.
There's an interesting technology that's being developed by some people that are involved with the IMA that it's called Web Worlds.
Oh,
and Selby, Evans, and Dieter, and a guy on my team are all, and also a singer girl are all working on different aspects of it. And it's really interesting because it uses XML code and some other commonly available open libraries to render simulations on a web browser. And they're even to the point where you can have a common experience so that multiple people can be logged into the same simulator on the web browser. And it's pretty interesting. Yeah. I think that's really where a lot of the technology may be going, and is going to help really open it up on the visual side of things, and to get away from a lot of the closed, the walled garden type model of things. When people, just like Apache opened up the internet, got us away from things like AOL and CompuServe and things like that. And Apache enabled anybody to have a website anywhere. I think this is the sort of technology that's going to help that.
I've been to his daily office hours with Selby a couple of times, but 2 weeks ago we had Dieter on this show, and it was a fascinating show because he was just telling us the whole background of it all. We've talked about the idea of a web-based viewer for OpenSim for a long time. I mean, it is now going beyond that for sure. And the theory was I would be quite happy with something lightweight where all we could do is walk around and click on the seat to sit down, right, and explore a lovely build. I don't need build tools or anything else like that. But the reason I wanted it was because, there's loads of people who never come into virtual worlds, and I could post a link on Facebook, which I don't normally use for anything to do with virtual worlds, and say to people I know, hey, I'm live and you can come and see me virtually, but using the web. Just click here, and
one click.
The wonderful
That's what you got to get it down to, one click.
Yeah. And the wonderful thing about Cyber Lounge, which is the official sort of platform name of the web world that Selby's using, which is Dieter was telling us about, and indeed the web client for space, or rather the web embed for space, is that they are suddenly doing that. I can go and join Selby and have a natter. It may not be full wide resolution and everything else at the moment, but it's basically OpenSim, drawn with HTML5, WebGL, and various packages of JavaScript. At the end of the day, isn't it? And it's as good. I actually thought the web world of Selby's, given there wasn't much in it, was as good as any OpenSim experience. And in fact, Ember, my friend who organises Safaris, was on that show with us, and she's usually the first to moan about walled gardens and things on the web and stuff like that, because she thinks the beauty of, something special about the hypergrid, And even she was jumping up and down about the idea that something that really existed in OpenSim could really be just converted and stuck up on the web.
Well, it's like I had an educator that reached out to us last week that said that, and he's taught in countries around the world, from Mexico to China to Egypt next. And he was saying that he had given up on the web experience. He didn't think it was ever going to happen. He was so pleased to see that we'd finally gotten there with the technology.
Yeah. And I had something, I think, which is just by telling you is indicative, right, of something that rather happened with space about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I had Leah Lobo here a few weeks ago, and she was talking about it because she was part of it. They had a kind of educational conference on the web, which was using Adobe Connect and stuff like that. And as part of this, they wanted a kind of little virtual book fair. And that was, I guess, put up by Adam for them on space. And what happened is they were all on, for those of you who don't know Adobe Connect, it's like got, places you can put text, you can share videos, you can have video conferencing and all sorts of stuff. But it's not a virtual world in its own right as we would think of it. It's a conferencing thing on the web. But what happened is, for a session, they gave people the web link to the space environment. They didn't send them to download space. They simply gave them the web link. So they were all logging in to the Space's live server via a web link. And something rather funny happened that Leah was telling me about afterwards. Was after this little exhibit showing the book fair was over, everybody was going back to the Adobe Connect interface, for the conference. But there are gaps in the conference. And by complete magic, just out of thin air, people started deciding to use the book fair sitting area in space as their water cooling area. Even though the book fair presentation was over, they were coming back into space just so they could sit on the cities and chat to each other's avatars. There's a kind of water cooler experience between the otherwise boring online sessions in Adobe Connect. And, because they'd been able to get there quickly on the web during the conference, and because they could keep it open and just dive back in there and meet and chat, it worked. I bet if a web version hadn't been available and they'd actually gone on to Connect and said, well, you got to go here, you got to download this client, then you got to fire it up, and then you got to find this address, etc., they wouldn't have got the traction. But because they were in Adobe Connect and they just typed a web link, boom, they were there in the room virtually.
One thing I've long argued that it hinders the growth of virtual world, particularly in Second Life and now in OpenSim, is that the people who designed it did not implement the ability for people to have domain names assigned to their simulators. And so, it's like like in the 2D web, there was a sort of transition point in the e-commerce between the old days when you would have a website served up by an ISP and your website URL was the ISP's URL and then a slash and a tilde and whatever your username is or whatever. And so it was impossible for people to remember that, and you didn't get any web traffic at all because of that. But as soon as it became easy to register domain names, then you started seeing, you could easily remember Amazon.com and eBay and things like that. And that's when things really started taking off. And nobody ever implemented that sort of utility in Second Life or OpenSim. And I think that's one of the big things that's hindering commerce in these platforms.
It's actually something that indirectly has hindered the hypergrid. Because I can actually give you Great Canadian Grid, login, blah, 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 the ports, and then the region, and you can get here in one jump. As long as you're already logged into the hypergrid somewhere, right? It's like a teleport. And Second Life, of course, introduced the SLIL business, where if you click on the SLIL link on the web, it takes you to Second Life site, and it automatically loads the area you want to go to into a map. And if you've got Second Life running on your computer, it will take you there. But if you haven't, it will take you to the download site for Second Life. And if you've got Second Life already and it's not running, it won't always launch it for you. But it was obviously a late way around that. But unfortunately, because so many people in OpenSim use Second Life based viewers, then that legacy system keeps interfering with our abilities to, because we don't have SLILs in OpenSim. We have HG and stuff like that.
Right.
But most viewers hijack it because they take you to the Second Life site saying SLIL unavailable or something. It's part of the legacy stuff in Second Life that's stuck in almost every OpenSim viewer. It's an obvious thing. I mean, high fidelity, and I guess through the embed codes, sine wave 2 space, have obviously tackled that from the start. I mean, before I knew what to do with it, I registered a domain name with high fidelity, and it expired about 3 years ago. And now I actually know what to do with it. Maybe I'll get it back. I don't know, but. Basically, if I'm in high fidelity and I want somebody to come to my region, which is actually a sandbox on my own computer, of course, that's the way high fidelity works, I simply get the region name and I type it to them, and they're in high fidelity. They paste it into the go-to field, and they immediately teleport into my computer and my region. And, that's fine. But, without the domain name registered, obviously I can't just post it on the web and tell people to pop in anytime. Which suits me fine, because I don't want people jumping into my home computer anytime when I'm doing other things, and it's still bandwidth being used and things can get messy. So I'm happy with that. But at least that is something they seem to have thought of from the word go, actually considering every virtual space to also be a domain space. And that is clearly going to make a big difference. Which it won't help Second Life, but it could certainly help worlds coming up in the future. All right. The heat is getting me here. I think I know this. I know this stuff. And gosh, yes. Now I'm beginning to remember all the things I still got to talk about. Now, Joey. Yes. Independent of all other stuff, I did see a post from you the other day. I should also mention to folks that you like our other filmer Marcus Llewellyn, and you work with Avacon as well, don't you?
Correct.
As Joey. So you're not just in space and all over all of us here today, I think, are all over the bloody place when you think about it. Avacon, of course, is the umbrella organization. We organize the OpenSim community convention under, and they are of course involved in lots of other educational and non-profit activities too. But you are using space, in fact, aren't you, to demo this nature quest thing, which is going to be at the ISTE conference? And it's only about a week away. Maybe you might tell us a bit about space, as well as actually building and creating regions in space. And uploading them. Space also classifies some regions, well, for want of a better expression, as quests, which means that when you're creating them in Unity, you can actually introduce gamey kind of elements that you might in a quest in a game into your build. And of course, all that is synced up to the space servers when you send your region up. And so what you're actually doing, Joey, is you're not only putting a region up, which has been compiled in Unity, but it actually it will be a quest, so it will have built-in tasks and stuff. So maybe tell us a little about how it all works and its function.
Yeah, sure. So I've worked in the education sector for a while. I was U.S. Navy as a combat photographer and a journalist, and I taught journalism and broadcasting at the Defense Information School. So I've seen as a teacher how it is. I've seen curriculum development. I developed courses. I later worked with Rasmussen College back in 2013, I think it was, where I developed a college undergrad course for them on engineering virtual worlds. So there I was working as a subject matter expert along with the ISD and to basically put the course materials together. So I have a pretty big heart when it comes to educators. I know the challenges that they face, and I'd like to make it much more fun to learn and help them to find ways to use these technologies in virtual worlds to bring education across in a way that's more meaningful, impactful, and that has greater value for the student. You know, better retention, saves lives, saves money, you know, all those kinds of things. So one of the things that I've been doing is working with bringing educators in for tours of space. We've been giving them some behind-the-scenes tours, showing them inside the Unity Space game engine, and also showing them those same things in World so that they can see back and forth between things, how easy it is to quest things, how to make things. And one of the really nice technologies we have inside of space is this thing called the quest system. Rohan Freeman is the one that has really put a lot of this together. You might know his company, Sine Wave Entertainment, from their vast experience with Motion Capture Studio. They have the largest motion capture studio of anybody servicing the virtual worlds between Second Life, Open Simulator, and IMView, and now space as well. So it's grown into this. Our environment is actually fairly mature after about 7 years of development. A lot of it was for white label solutions for companies that were doing conferences and things like that. So they were perfecting the technology as they went. And then we just went into beta last November in 2016. So we're starting to grow the technology and bring it across as a full platform. And one of the really nice things in there is this quest system. It allows you to, without the need for scripting, using what's called visual scripting, where you're able to just simply take modules and plug them together, and it has parameters. Like, let's say you want your you want to talk to an NPC, so you have an NPC there that you click on. You know, kind of like World of Warcraft, where you come up and they have an exclamation point over their head, for example. That's one option. And you come up to them, and that shows that there's some kind of interchange with that character. And then what you do is you basically set up the thread for the conversation, who says what back and forth. If you want, you can add audio. If you want the audio to be lip synced, you can have it lip synced to the avatar. It uses the hertz cycle of what they're saying to actually cause the lip animation. In fact, we have a video up on our YouTube channel for Sine Wave Entertainment, which shows a really cool one with this female avatar that's an NPC that's actually singing lip synced, and the whole mouth movement is done through the hertz cycles. So it's not anybody behind it. It's just her moving the lips based off of the sound values. Wow. So you can do amazing things nowadays. And what we're doing is we're making it simple. so that anybody can come in and throw together a quest, focus on their story, and just assemble the pieces together. So kind of our test on this was to put me as the test dummy, I guess you'd call it, put me into the car and try to see, can I make a quest up for this conference? Now, I'm only about halfway there, and I got a week left, and my pants are on fire. So I'm up against the wall to get this thing put together. But I'm trying to make sure that I can do it, because I could have just taken a prepackaged one that we've already done, that Rohan's done. And we've got several of those that you can experience in World, including the Alice quest, which is pretty fun. It has kind of that unusual British humor to it.
Yeah, Rowan is just down the road here somewhere, but well, they've been around a long while. Yeah, he's
so I'm trying to put together this one called Nature Quest, and I got about a week left on it. The conference I'm going to is called the International Society for Technology in Education, otherwise known as ISTE, I-S-T-E. And this takes place each year. This one is in San Antonio, Texas. It starts on the 27th, I believe. No, excuse me, not 27th, the 25th. They actually have some events, pre-events on the 24th, but I'm going to be arriving the 25th, and I'll be there through the 28th. And I've known a group of educators because I've been part of their group in Second Life for a number of years.
I was just going to say, ISTE used to Virtual Worlds with Second Life. And
I've been involved with ISTE. The other one I'm really big with is VISTE, which is the Virginia version of it, which is the state I'm in. I'm in Virginia Beach. And the state I'm in has had a lot of educators that use virtual worlds for some reason. The state of Virginia seems to really be into using the technology. So both of those groups, and also the virtual world's best practices in education, I've been very heavily involved with over the years, watching where the technology is going and trying to see where I can help out with it. So what I'm going to do is there's about, I think last year there was like 16 or 17,000 educators focused on innovation at the conference. And I'm going to be helping out with two elements of it. On Monday night, I'm going to be helping with the games and LAN night, where they're basically getting together and playing games. So I'm going to demo the Nature Quest at that point. And basically you have some seeds that you have to basically bring this to fruition, grow the plant, and make it bloom. In the meantime, there's this killer ladybug that had some insecticide that was sprayed on it, and it became an evil ladybug. So you have to do what you can to save this plant and not let the ladybug kill it. And you interact with all these different characters. There's Sporty Granny. There's a number of characters. Let me bring that up on my screen real quick here.
This is that gamification of education, is it not?
Yeah, I want to make it fun, because what I think we can do, and that's where I think the value really comes in having a game engine like Unity that we have in space, is you have the ability to make education fun and to have AAA level game assets that you're using, and you don't have to create all this stuff yourself. A lot of this stuff, like what I'm doing in this, is I'm trying as much as possible to keep it free, to keep it low cost, or keep it things that an instructor would have access to. So I'm using some avatars that come from Mixamo. I'm using assets that are mostly free. I did pay for a couple, like I paid, I think, like $5 or $10 for the ladybug, because it had some cool animations and it was a cool character. And then also for the seeds and things like that, I wanted to show the evolution of the plant. But I'm trying to make it very low budget, because I really know that the importance of this is not just for me to go out there and do a spectacular thing that's produced in a studio. The important thing here is for me to do something that they can emulate. So if a teacher sees it, they can walk away and make something just as good, if not better. I just gave a seed. Now they can grow it in their own application, So that's what I'm really looking at. And in fact, I pitched 3 ideas to Rohan to start with, and we went with the nature one because we thought that was, the most environmentally friendly, and it was something that really resonated across a broad range of different audiences.
I'll tell you one thing Unity needs to fix, and that is the quality of the trees you use when you're painting trees onto terrain.
Well, you can just swap your trees out.
Yeah,
if you bring a better tree in, and then you can just swap that out. That's not that hard. In fact, you can also paint with voxels too if you wanted to.
I know that I did. Rowan I think it was Rowan or Adam pointed me to a plugin which.
You should go on the.
It allows me to literally press a square box like a prim and then hand paint the surface. Like I'm painting a.
Oh yeah, that's sweet. Yeah, but when you get a chance, go Inworld on the creator side because we have two sides to the grid. There's a creator side and there's the live side of the servers. Creator side is where the creatives are putting their stuff up, testing it first before they go ahead and push it to the live grid. To make sure that everything works right before they bring it onto live. But on the creator side, there's one, if you search for voxel, and you'll see an environment completely made out of voxels. It's wonderful. But basically, in this case, I have the Atrina plant that you're helping to grow and blossom. Like I said, you have the evil ladybug that's a sinister insect. Sporty Granny, she has a magical mix of wisdom as she helps you along the path. The thing is, she speaks in riddles, so you got to kind of figure out what she's saying and try to unravel it. But she's very consumed with staying fit and knows much about the value of eating healthy foods, and she grows them in her own garden. You got this guy that has dreadlocks. I call him Kaya Dreads. He's from a secret society known only to a few as the Pastafarians. They love to eat plants with their pasta. But he knows some secrets about the Atrina plant, so if you can get him to talk about it, it'll help you to succeed.
I was suddenly imagining loads of avatars with spaghetti as dreadlocks, but never mind.
Yeah. Well, if you remember, the CTO of Second Life when it first came out, he was the great spaghetti monster. That was part of the Pastafarian cult. If you remember that one offhand. Yeah, that was what is his name? He went on Corey Drinka. Yeah, he went on to start his own company after he left Second Life, but he's the one that started LSL, the Linden scripting language. He's the one that designed that, and he was the chief technology officer for Linden Lab when they first started. But Corey has a lot of great stuff that he's done. He ended up going in and saving Facebook because his company got bought by Facebook. And he saw that there were problems with the way that they were doing their mobile app, and he steered them in the right direction. But I also believe Corey was kind of a mastermind.
Traitor. He sold out Facebook.
I wouldn't call him a traitor. I mean, he's the one that brought. He's the one that brought the Oculus, I think, into view for Mark Zuckerberg to understand the importance and the significance of virtual reality for Facebook. So now they have Oculus Studio. I mean, I don't know all this stuff for 100%, but just seeing the lines there, I think he probably influenced a lot of that.
That's it was on we did it on the news here a couple of weeks ago. They've closed the Oculus Studio.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, I mean they still own Oculus, and they're playing ahead without that character.
Yeah, because they were going to do 6 films inside of a year, which was very impressive to see them doing so much. Even though they're short films, that's a pretty hefty toke to do. But back to my characters, there's Claire. Yeah. She's your typical girl growing up in a fairy tale world. She's kind of like your ADHD kid. She's always thinking about things, dreamland and, faraway places, adventures. She loves to read books. So you got to kind of get her to stop and focus for a few minutes so that you can find out what you need to know from her. Next character I had is AJ.
Actually, rather than go through the whole game, which take us off course a bit. I mean, is this something that after you demoed it will be available
as soon as we're ready to post this thing up, we will make it available, and you can actually go in and play the game in space on live as well.
Right. Late last year, I'd actually had quite a heavy session with Adam, I guess. Screen sharing and roaming everywhere, really. And it was literally about a week before last year's Virtual World's Best Practices conference. And I guess you were there because it was almost like deja vu because there were several of the keynotes there, and one of the ones that wasn't a keynote, but Dave Burden from Dayton in the UK.
Yeah, no, David.
Yeah, he was showing off fieldscapes. There were actually about 3 different instances shown off at VWBP on slideshows behind the speakers, which were clearly more or less similar Unity-based things. I mean, they weren't anything like the complexity of space. What they'd done is they'd stripped them down to be single purpose, which was, to make educational experiences. But I was at the conference. We were filming it and a lot of it, and watching this go by, and I was thinking, hang on, I want to interrupt. I want to tell them that I was in space last week, and it's all a bit like this. And I was very, very struck by the number of people who were working in that educational virtual space who have been adopting Unity, even though effectively when you saw all the interfaces, they had a commonality, but it wasn't like that's the Unity interface. It was very much their interface, but it had that slight design. The HUDs and everything had that Unity look, should we say. But it was actually fascinating to see so many people, basically working in a similar space, centered on Unity.
Mm-hmm.
Although spaces obviously opened up, a great deal beyond that, so to speak. But
yeah, I worked with David as well. In fact, my character here, Sun Tzu, is from actually Second Life days when I was working with the University of Edinburgh and Army Research Lab. I created a Sun Tzu avatar, and David Burton's technology from Dayton was one of the technologies that we use. I worked with an old Army cavalry officer there. I was a futurist, and we were basically looking about 15 to 20 years into the future. And a lot of it was looking at trends data, where things are going. Like right now, there's more deaths each year than there are births in Europe. And what kind of impact does that have on the future? Who's taking over those jobs, and how is that going to affect things? And especially looking at how the impacts would be on the U.S. military, but also on others as well. So, I basically, my Army cavalry officer that was my boss, he was like, I've always wanted to meet Sun Tzu and ask him some questions. So I went out and I built a Sun Tzu avatar and turned him into a AI agent using Dayton Technologies as a demo of Dayton's work. And we basically had Sun Tzu able to scrape the web to answer questions for you intelligently. He would give you tours of the Sims. He would basically be a smart agent that could, interact with you in a helpful way.
And no doubt a lot more helpful than the lady residing in my Amazon Echo, who has to remain nameless before she starts up. Yeah, wonderful stuff. So, yeah, I mean, clearly it's an indicator here of the way things are going, I think. I mean, I mentioned earlier, I mean, we're getting towards probably the end point of the show here, but I did mention earlier, the fact that virtual worlds, there's no like foundation protocols the way there were that allowed the web to grow on the internet. But when you see a lot of things being authored with something like Unity, you do begin to think. For example, if I alter something in Unity, the space plugin allows me certain tools, and obviously to export to space. Presumably, maybe there will be a grid phone plugin which will allow me to work with that and export that as appropriately. But also a number of other things. Most of the people at VWBPE who were doing this also were saying that their set of tools is available as like a package that plugs in to Unity, or was maybe even built in Unity in the first place.
Cool.
And I'm really still trying to get to grips with Unity, but I mean, one of the things it's clearly going to be able to provide is in the essential Unity interface, as opposed to the menus that are plugins for space and whatever, there are going to be a growing number of facilities that can be incorporated in what you're doing. That's again maybe deployed in various different places. So I may deploy something into space using the space export, but I've included something that I also imported into Unity from another source that may be as with Mike's grid phone or something, could connect to a completely different space other than other than space itself. In other words, it doesn't affect the space economy or the business model, but it is just something inside of space that has an external communication to another platform. It was the commonality being that they were mastered in Unity, as it were.
Well, that's very, very similar to like what we've had with internet relay chat rooms or IRCs.
Yeah.
You know, when they first started up the OpenSim community, they had a lot of folks that were like, I was in a group called AW Groupies, AWG, in Second Life. When they started to jump over to the OpenSim side, they still wanted to communicate back and forth. So I forget the lady's name, but she had started up a, I think it was the lady, it's been a few years, but had started up a thing in OpenSim where they set up an IRC there, and then they tied that IRC into the group chat in Second Life. So it talked from one group chat in Second Life to another group chat in OpenSim. And that way people on both sides could talk back and forth like they were in the same universe, you know? So that's...
Yeah, earlier on, Mike mentioned that back in his Second Life days, he was slightly like me, I guess, involved with a show called Metanomics.
Oh, I remember that.
Which is... we had a chat system there that linked the chat on the sim where the event took place and the bit was being filmed to lots of outpost sims. And that also, if I remember rightly, and a couple of other things in Second Life were also linked in the same way to Internet Relay Chat. And there's another, the people who used to broadcast, a company called Tree TV, they also developed, and they did a version for me as well. We had like an embed code of a channel on the web player. Video this is, and there was a chat room underneath, which was basically an IRC client. But when you chose the IRC channel you wanted to talk on, you were actually talking on one of our Inworld broadcast channels. So members of MBTV viewers group in Second Life could actually be talking on the web with talking with people on the web who were using the IRC interface underneath the video embed. So unlike where we're broadcasting now on Google or where we used to broadcast on Livestream, there's a chat room there, but it's limited to people logged into Livestream or Google or at YouTube. Whereas this system, underneath the video embed, there was a separate embed for IRC that links straight with the in-world audience. Yeah. So people watching the video at home were able to talk in chat to people who are in the in-world audience. And the chat stream was just one continuous stream. You know, you didn't really know the difference, except there was a little suffix after somebody's name to indicate whether they were on the web or in-world.
Hey, Mal, I will be back in just a minute. Real life sometimes supersedes virtuality. My little Yorkie is looking at me with those eyes, you know, those cute little puppy dog eyes, and saying, "Daddy, it's time for my treat, and you got to give it to me now."
Right.
I'll be right back.
Okay, I'm going to move back to Mike anyway. I think we've been overshadowed here. I'm trying to recall, but before we came on air, I had so many different things that I'm just gonna. We're getting close to the end here, Mike. Do you? Mike, you are still with us, aren't you? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. I'm getting confused. Who's on what side here? My stereo's back to front. Right. I think the best question is kind of a what else? We always close this show with sort of other things people want to mention, bring up, and stuff like that. We covered earlier on a pretty vast amount of stuff. Your history with Second Life, then OpenSim, and then moving on back in OpenSim. The IMA, the web chat, of course. What's on that massive resume of yours, or indeed your agenda, have we not covered yet?
Well, one of the things that we're working on with the Commerce Working Group in both IP protection And with currency, is we're looking at what's really an exploding technology with regard to money and databases. It's called cryptocurrency. And
Bitcoin blockchain kind of, yeah.
Yeah, and everybody's heard of Bitcoin one way or another, but there's a lot of other cryptocurrencies out there, and cryptocurrencies work on a sort of database called a blockchain, which is essentially a time-released linked line of blocks of data that are cryptographically linked together, and people mine the blockchain to generate new coins, and the data that's in the blocks, at least for Bitcoins, is previous coin transactions, and so you're authenticating the validity of the coin transactions and the creation of new coins and so forth. But the fact is that you can use this blockchain technology for all sorts of data processing under whatever sort of algorithm you want to code into the system. And so you can do things like smart contracts, and people that want to know what's a smart contract, how's that different from a regular contract. Well, if for those that are familiar with OpenSim and Second Life, when you create a prim and you're looking at the edit dialog, and you look at the name and the creator and the owner and the permissions for mod copy trans, those settings, whatever you as the creator set those to, that's a smart contract. Okay. Right. In the virtual world platforms that we're used to, those smart contracts are stored centrally in an asset server for the grid that the person is a creator on. And so it's there's a security weakness there by that sort of centralization, not just for security of the IP, but also the security of the user to their data if they're relying on some other party's asset server. So there's a blockchain called Ethereum, which is another big one that people are hearing more about these days, that allows you to use a programming language called Solidity to code your own smart contracts. And so you can do all sorts of different contracts there. You can create clubs or with membership, or a corporation with stock. You can do bets on sports. You can any sort of contract you can think of. If you think of laws and regulations and contractual clauses, really there's a reason that lawyers call that code and programmers call their language code, because they're really very similar, and you can convert legal code into programming code to make smart contracts to execute automatically. And so this is really where things are going to be going with, as we get an open metaverse where things are getting more decentralized, but we still want to have common standards. So we're looking at the idea of having a standard for metaverse blockchains that would implement smart contracts for protection of creator permissions, for user registrations, for even things like groups and even dispute resolution. I'm sure everybody's familiar with problems with griefers in Second Life and so forth. And a lot of the griefing that goes on happens, I found, because people who have grievances don't feel that they have a way of resolving their disputes that's at all legitimate, because if one side is friends with one of the game gods, they can use their corrupt influence to gain an advantage in a dispute, or there just simply isn't any venue for dealing with disputes unless you go to a real life court, which costs a huge ton of money and doesn't really fit our economy. And
we talk about IP theft.
Well, IP theft or just plain old griefing from regular disputes.
Okay. Yeah, we're basically talking about smart contracts and the blockchain as protection, basically. And if things like asset permissions and stuff.
Yeah.
If they're protected by blockchain technology, they're much more secure.
That's one thing that Adam really looked at seriously is how do you make it safer inside of a virtual environment than it is in Second Life and Open Simulator. So one thing we have with the Unity engine is that it encrypts it.
Yeah, hang on. Let Mike finish first, because he was actually explaining how they're looking at the blockchain to do that. Then I'll come back.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So, one of the things if you look at government of any sort, whether it's community governance or real life government, you look at what they're doing and you can figure out that really what government services is they're essentially monopolies on different aspects of insurance markets. And so if you look at it that way, you can theoretically implement anything you need a government to do as an insurance contract. And if you can do that, you can make a smart contract. And so therefore you could decentralize any sort of governance functions you need into a blockchain to operate in an automatic basis, so you don't need to worry about governance teams or game gods or whatever. You can basically interact directly with the blockchain, see whatever the service needs you have for your governance needs are, and there's a smart contract that can be there that can respond to that need and provide you with those services. So this is something that we're...
One thing I've heard, I really don't follow half of this half the time, but one thing I've heard is that the distributed keys, for example, in a blockchain,
right,
they are kind of distributed, aren't they? So authentication is much more precise, because a key somewhere will match another one. This sounds like another game, actually. Find all the keys and put them together. But the security embedded there. But one thing that puzzles me is these services are still having to be delivered, aren't they? However secure, the specifics of the code, right? How does the code live? Is it ultimately in a kind of distributed database?
Yes, and that's the great thing with blockchains, is that it's decentralized. So it's not just one database sitting on a server somewhere that somebody controls. It's distributed globally to many nodes and many users, so that not just that they can use it for whatever their needs are, but they can actively participate in authenticating the transactions. And that's where the term mining comes from, where you use your computing capability of your computer to run a hashing function to authenticate those transactions in each successive block. And that's how the miner earns new cryptocurrency that gets generated by solving those blocks.
I've heard of a couple of security instances recently that we all get pissed off with spammers and DOS attacks and everything else, but I keep finding myself watching out for people who are actually using my computer on my downtime bandwidth for their own mining operations, which that seems to be one slight hole in the system at the moment. That end users need to be if your machine's on all night and is crunching numbers for somebody else to earn bitcoins or something, I don't get any commission even. But the thing is, when we're talking about, say, let's say we're talking about implementing this with Inworld assets, the asset servers, the databases themselves, of course.
Right.
And the authentication systems will connect with these blockchain type databases. The thing is all still controlled, presumably the only way of processing all this stuff is still through, if not the way of the internet. It's all down to IP traffic, isn't it? Even though Bitcoin, I presume exists, it might be virtual, but it still tangibly exists somewhere. But without internet access, you can't access your Bitcoin, can you? So it is very much an online.
That's not necessarily true. There's actually ways, because there are people who have those concerns, who, preppers and things like that, and they've actually developed technologies that allow you to remove your Bitcoin from the blockchain and print it up on a piece of paper and they call it the paper wallet. So you can actually store your Bitcoins as a printed piece of paper in a safe somewhere. And as long as nobody breaks into your safe and steals your pieces of paper, it's perfectly secure.
So it's like a check or putting something into a bank account in the real world.
As long as there's still currency in the Bitcoin system. If the system goes down, then you're SOL. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Is that the way that the paper wallet system works is that you can have an application on your smartphone or on your computer that doesn't rely on the internet. And so you could basically, if someone has stuff for sale, let's say it's after the world ends, and someone has a huge stockpile of food or medicine or whatever, and I need some, so I would take my printed Bitcoins out of my safe and go over to their place, and I say I want whatever, and he says, okay, it's $100,000 for a bag of rice, and so I say, okay, here's $100,000 Bitcoin. And so he basically scans the code, and it goes into his system, and it basically hashes out the transaction.
Yeah, and so the note has no value anymore because it gets transferred electronically
So he gets it. So he can print it up. He can rehash it, and it gets printed up into his paper wallet. And so it's definitely possible, and people are still doing it right now, to actually use Bitcoin in a sneaker net sort of.
But if I ask a question here, because I'm sure I've always assumed it wouldn't be possible because of the electronic networks involved. But could I be offline on my own computer and mine Bitcoins overnight?
That's the one thing that becomes problematic is you can theoretically you can be off the internet and get your blocks over any other sort of transmission medium. Like there are people who transmit Bitcoin blocks over shortwave radio. So
it has to be transmit.
Yeah, because it is a network system. To authenticate those transactions, you definitely need to have some way of sharing information.
Now, let's say I don't want to dwell on this, but we should, in as short time as we can, get this out of the way because it's an interesting question. I was really fascinated when Mike, you said, right, like I res a prim, and I do something magical to that prim that makes it a high value item. I don't know what, but let's say I did manage to do it. A unique distortion of some sort, which is considered the highest value work of art you've ever seen. Wish. But let's just pretend. Now, I will set export permissions, copy modify permissions, and all sorts of that things on it. But remember, this is a really valuable piece of virtual artwork. It's no longer the square prim; it's a square prim with a unique smudge.
Right.
So I really want this to be secured by a blockchain contract, and you liken this when you talk about government, you would liken this to insurance company kind of thing.
Right.
Now, I'm also, I have a landlord, right? And I have for 20 years, this is real life, by the way, a contract, a tenancy agreement, right? And to me, a tenancy agreement is a binding contract. And you don't want to go into dispute, they agree something, you agree the other. But they've got add-ons like service charges and stuff like that. And I was telling somebody the other day, and this is just coming to my head, by the way, I'm not going to moan, that our landlord seems to have an amazing capacity for varying the terms of the agreement from year to year, whereas we have no capacity for varying them at all. Now, let's say that, like my unique prim, was governed by a blockchain-based contract. Mm-hmm. The avenues for dispute are seemingly less because it's a very solidified thing, even though it's electronic. But what happens, not so much with contract dispute, but when you want to renegotiate that contract, how complex does that become when it's all secured in the blockchain system? For example, coming back to my super prime work of artwork, the squash film or whatever it was.
Right.
Let's say the person I've sold it to, I'm warranted as creator, but somebody else has full ownership rights, then wants to resell it as a rare piece of artwork at a higher price. And presumably their freedom to do so will be hard-coded into the blockchain contract. But what if it wasn't, and they needed to get permission off me, and I needed to give them permission? How do I get it? Won't it become very complex to get in and tweak the contract, given how distributed it is and secure it is in a way?
Well, if it's a no-copy item, it's the only one in existence.
Yeah.
And you created it, then when it comes back to you, you ought to be able to change the terms.
Yes, but it wouldn't come back to me. I will permanently sell it, and I would enter into a contract with a buyer saying they have complete ownership of it in return for, sort of 50 billion American dollars, which would suit me fine. And I won't go back on that contract. That's what they pay for it. But they may be a speculator, and they may now, if it's a binding contract, they may be able to transfer that contract to another buyer where they resell it for 100 billion US dollars, and they make 50 billion out of it. That's the way the world works. So I presume that would be possible.
Yes.
But I'm thinking in an instance where I wouldn't actually be cancelling the contract and taking it back. What if there was something about the contract that the two of us agreed we wanted to modify between us, but we wanted it in writing in the contract, so to speak? Isn't the...
Yeah, you can code in amendment procedures, and basically you can essentially have, and that's sort of like forking software. So you could basically, you have your public key and your private key, and they have their public key and their private key, and you use your public key and private key not just to encrypt communications, but to authenticate that it was actually a communication was actually from you. So you could say, here's the code to amend this contract, and I'm submitting it to amend this smart contract, and it will take force when the other person authenticates that amendment with their own key. And so that indicates that there is consent by both parties.
So something you will know quite well here. Okay, I'll give you an example. Right, I am a hair designer, and I've created a wonderful piece of stylized hair for you. And it's a best-selling hairdo, best-selling wig in Second Life or Ibn Sim. Right, and lots of people buy it because it's not a no copy thing. I'm selling multiples, but then, like happens with virtual goods, the platform I'm on suddenly allows flexi brims. So I update my wig, right, to include flexi brims, and I want to offer to all the people that have bought it already the flexi brim version. So I really want that. I want the contract to include the ability to send and replace the item.
Space does that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Space, you upload your new item, it sends it out to everybody with the new features.
Yeah, and you can do that because every transaction is on the blockchain and everybody has a copy of the blockchain. When you update a contract that with new content, then everybody's wallet, as they're hashing their wallet each day to see, what came in, what went out, and so forth, automatically will go through and say, oh, you got a new piece of hair here, and it'll download it into your inventory.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, I've exhausted my questions of trying to find a fault in the system.
Yeah, and what that also provides too, Mal, is like with Space, we have the capability, and this is something that's sorely missed in Second Life, and of course OpenSim, is there's always intellectual property rights theft items. Yeah. Now ours is protected by encryption, so it's pretty hard to steal items inside of something that's Unity based. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, with anything, if you hack at something long enough, you could possibly get in. But one thing that we
Right.
have is a feature. Like I've been talking to some creatives, and it's like they follow their they follow their complaint with Linden Lab. But you can't take on these things over every single petty little theft, because you need attorneys around the clock doing that to be able to keep up with it all. So in a lot of cases, the creatives are sitting here and having their stuff ripped off left and right because people are stealing it, onesie here, onesie there, and and then you go to Linden Lab and you file your complaint on it, and they'll delete that single item. But guess what? That same person still has the original asset. They still go out and they still use it again. What we have as a capability with Space is we can reach out to every single item that was stolen like that in the case, if that were to ever happen, and zap them right there and then. So we're looking for ways that we take care of the creators so that we protect their rights, because we understand that if we want to have a good metaverse ecosystem, a lot of that depends on the ecosystem protecting those that are creating the content in the first place.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know it's fairly easy to copy stuff in Unity, but of course the assets become very different once they've uploaded into Signwave's.
Yeah, then it's encrypted.
Yeah. So presumably everything I upload, either within a region when I upload a region, or as an item when I simply upload an item, is kind of uniquely encrypted as it's uploaded, and then it becomes a fixed asset that's owned by me. And and it can't be stolen or anything else unless I put it on the marketplace and sell it, or unless I myself have uploaded something that's accidentally infringed copyright, in which case that would be mediation. But like Adam was saying, there's always a delay in cash outs.
On Space, how does the encryption system there deal with things like GL intercept?
You'd have to talk to Adam on that, because that's not my area. I don't know enough to speak intelligently on that.
Okay. And this is something where I've been looking. I've seen the copybotters do use things like GL intercept to get around the connection between the viewer code and the archived data, and to intercept the data on the graphics card.
Yeah, there's another level of encryption there, because, like, for example, High Fidelity doesn't have their stuff encrypted, so people could basically steal stuff from High Fidelity fairly easily, because it's pretty much open. The stuff is being downloaded to your computer without the encryption on it. So we do have that level of extra encryption that they don't have, that they don't offer. Now, I don't know if you're familiar that much with Adam Frisbee, but he's pretty much a genius with a lot of this stuff. He was one of the two founders of OpenSIM technology, and also one of the original hosts of the OS Grid. He did some of the reverse engineering of all that. So he fully understands a lot of those aspects and understands how to combat them as a result. He wants to make sure that he's making the metaverse a safe place for people to play and to work and to make a living,
Yeah, one thing that can be done to deal with even the on the upload side of things is to have heuristics on the import process, so that when people are importing content from their own PC or other websites or whatever, you can do various sort of checks on the data being uploaded, and so you can see, oh, this is using this texture, which is the same byte count as this other texture, and this mesh has the same byte count as this other mesh, and so forth. So that way you can really detect stuff that has been intercepted and is being re-uploaded.
Well, one thing that we do in Space in particular is, like I said, we have two grids. There's two sets of servers. There's the creator servers where you test things, and then there's the live servers. So we have people push their content to the creator server first to check it out before they bring it to live, to make sure for stability issues and things like that it's going to work as they were expecting it to work, and make sure there's no problems before it goes on to live. But when it goes to that push, the final push to put it on live, it takes a little longer for it to actually get approved, because a human being is actually eyeballing it, checking it to make sure that it meets our content guidelines, and also checking it to make sure that it meets the intellectual property rights. Now, as far as the heuristic technologies, yes, They're working towards that. I'm not sure how much of that's implemented at this time, but that's something that's always interests me, like seeing this stuff. If you remember a commercial a while back from Google where the guy comes into a interview and he sees this painting up on the wall and he takes a picture of it, and his Google browser tells him that that's Liechtenstein, and he's able to talk intelligently with the guy during the interview about the painting that's in his office, just because it's able to recognize things. Well, I've always thought that that would be an awesome way, like you're talking with the heuristics, of being able to basically look at items, and depending upon their color sets, their values for byte count and things like that, be able to tell, is this something that was used someplace else and ripped off from somebody's legal assets just to bring it into the environment? Because, that's going to be about the best way to protect those IP rights. Because you take a look at Second Life, a lot of the stuff there, I'd say probably over 3/4 of it is stuff that is, reused from other assets. It's a lot of remixing. And not that remixing is always bad. In some cases, it's a viable way to do business. But is it, we want to make sure that we're doing business the right way, and we're keeping it as an environment that is productive for creatives to come in and create, and also be rewarded for their work, so that they're actually getting the money for what they're laboring over.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a system where you could, make your content resellable and earn money on people reselling your stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff in Second Life is that way right now. You'll notice that a lot of the outfits are the same things because it's the same exact mesh, but it's being retextured by different artists. So they're what they do is they buy into these things where they have a subscription, so that they continue to get the meshes that are sent out, and then they just do some retexturing and maybe add a little things to it or combine things together to make them a little bit different than the other store that's just down the block. But that has some good use, but it also has some bad use because it floods the market with a lot of things that look almost identical. And is that necessarily the right way to, for things to go in the future?
I think there are other inherent reasons for that. I mean, I go onto grids for a long while, OpenSim, even with the hypergrid and lots of different regions. Every second stop would look like Linda Kelly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't nothing illegal about it.
It floods the market.
Yeah. And it's not really flooding the market because she gives it all away. So it's not really a market, but it kind of floods the environment in a way. It just makes it look, it's creatively a bit boring because it makes everything look very sort of samey. I've always liked the actual button that says I'm allowed to mod things, because if I got something boring that looks samey, I can retexture it and try and make it look a bit different, But those permissions are all, they work fairly well if they can be secured, even better. With like blockchain contract type things, then so much the better. But the only thing, of course, is missing is adequate export permissions. You can't export from Second Life at all, even if somebody wants you to. And I still get into arguments with Second Life content creators who say I don't want things to be exportable because you might be able to wear them or use them in your OpenSim or something. I say, yes, but just think, OpenSim is another place you could be putting your store. It swings and roundabouts.
Yeah.
Why would you want only 1,000 customers in Second Life when you could possibly have a branch of your shop in 2 other grids and have 5,000 customers?
But I've also seen other vendors that actually provide their stuff for sale in Second Life on the marketplace, but then offer the same things for free in Open Simulator. It just all depends on how you work it. There are ways to still make a profit, but also be part of the open source community at the same time.
Well, I have seen instances of files for skins and things like that, where they give you a package, and inside the package there is, for example, a downloadable Photoshop template. So what you're buying actually is like a maker's kit in some ways, rather than a final object. There may be a final object in there, but they make extra money by selling you all the components and basically telling you how to modify it yourself. So they probably charge more for that than a single product, but fair enough. Yeah. Anyway, I think we're going to have to wrap this show, because we are renowned here for having long shows. 2 hours minimum usually, sometimes, but we've been on for 2.5 hours, so this has become one of our epics, and it's been great. I particularly think I'll apologize to anybody watching. We did go off into some slightly technical areas during this show, but I think it was all in pretty layman's language, so I'm pretty sure you followed the gist of some of the bits we were saying, and it's been fascinating. The first thing I'm going to do actually is go over to James to see if he's got any final questions. He's been quite quiet, and now the two of you are here, I'm wondering if James might have any comments or questions.
Well, I I hesitate to ask questions because I could take us off on another tangent. I'm very interested in the concept of avatar portability, and I keep thinking that beyond the technology issue, there's also the issue of either related to copyright or to some aspect the origin of the avatar as a kind of an independent entity that would somehow say, okay, well this avatar is an entity that can be represented in these different platforms, and I'm not sure quite how to express that, but it's definitely an area that I'm curious about.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Hey, James.
Yeah.
When you get a chance, take a look at the link I dropped to you in Skype about it in our group chat here.
Okay.
It's one that Vast Park was working on back in 2011.
The open source.
Open Avatar.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not sure what happened with that, but maybe if the right people are involved, we could find a way to re-synergize that and get things moving ahead for it, because I run into that with a lot of creatives, like, for example, groups that are looking to do work for educators.
Yeah.
It would be nice to have a business set of avatars that you could use to demo products to customers instead of having to go out and create everything on your own dime.
Sure.
Yep. Plus, the other thing is being able to take your presence from virtual environment to virtual environment to virtual environment.
Yep.
I actually I know Bruce Joy rather well, and
he's left there, by the way. I don't think he's at Vast Park anymore. Yeah.
No. I mean, he's still got the account, but he works for some medical company, I gather from things. But great guy. It's a shame if he wanted a public platform, but it became an enterprise one, and then I guess it's down to the number of clients you've got and whatever. But yeah, the Open Avatar project was great, and in fact, I was just trying to set up a new system here in the last couple of weeks, and I've actually found my Open Avatar file, which was generated for me back then, and I mean, basically, they generated you made the avatar, and they had it was made by a company that it didn't cost anything, but they made some kind of deal with, and then you could literally download. You downloaded that avatar they made for you in virtually every format under the sun, so you're then free to.
Is that Evolver, maybe?
Evolver, that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, Evolver got bought up, and now. They were bought because I had contracts with them for a couple of my government customers, but back in that day, and they got bought by Autodesk, and now it's known as the Autodesk Character Generator. So yeah, they got the technology there, but one of the things that they no longer have was they used to have a way for you to upload a picture of your face, and you could actually apply that to the character to make it look like the real life you, which was pretty ingenious, but they took that away, I think, in the Autodesk Character Generator. You
can actually have that done now. There's a service on the web, not the full body scan thing that Hyperfidelity are dealing with, but there's They announced I remember reading it down in the news, a week or a couple of months ago. Not that long ago, anyway.
If you get a link for it later, share it with me, and I'll share one with you all for the Autodesk one too.
Yeah, basically the one on the web is really for facial. You can actually provide them with enough facial shots, and they actually calculate the thing to make a mesh of your head and sort of stuff like that. So. And then it is yours. But you provided all the photographic material for them to make it, and they're a service. They make it, and then it's yours. It's not like they own it. And I'll let people into a bit of a secret here. Our son has been Joey has been IMing me in my private Skype, taking photographs of my avatar here, promising that the next time I see it, it will be one consolidated mesh. Which means my clothes and my look would all be a single brim mesh, presumably. Love it. That's just what I want. Yeah. Then I really can't be.
Yeah, I told him that I'd basically be looking at an avatar that looked kind of like David Bowie with red hair, mustache, and beard.
Yeah, and it's worth saying for the fashionistas following us, we might as well tell everybody, son, that your avatar is a mesh.
No, actually, mine is a OpenSim avatar with a mesh. With I think some of this is sculpts, I think. But this was from a very creative designer on Kitely Grid. I don't have her name, but I can tell you because I hypergrid in, and let's see if it tells me the creator when I edit on it.
It's not Tana, is it?
She has a set of Japanese Edo period sims on Kitely that is very beautiful. Let me see if I can get to it.
I don't know when you were logging in and we were sort of already.
Yeah, it's telling me unknown user, so I can't see what her name is. I'm sorry, but she was the same one that did the Great Wall of China in Second Life, and she uses Open Simulator. I don't know if it's Sim on a stick or it might be just a standard vanilla Open Sim version. But what she does is she goes to clients that she has. And she shows them these mock-ups of basically like pavilions that she makes for their backyards and such that are beautiful, beautiful craftsmanship. And she's replicated them inside of Open Simulators so that she can show them a virtualization of it, talk about design aspects, and then she's able to finalize the design and make it for them in real life. So it was kind of a clever idea, the way that she does things. And it's still that Japanese flavor of things, to put into her work. So very creative person.
Nice.
Well, one of the reasons I on NetSuite show, by the way, we unless if all goes according to plan, we're going to be joined by Fred Buchhusen or Ferd Fredericks.
Ferd's awesome guy. Yeah.
So I'd been hoping it was this week, but we've more or less confirmed for next week. But as well as having taken over Maria's Hyperica and various things, he of course is responsible for Outworld, spelled as a Z, which is an OpenSim installer that installs itself onto your hard disk. And you can keep it offline if you want, or you can hypergrid connect it. But one of the reasons I've been exploring that bears on what we were talking about earlier, of build once, deploy everywhere. I do know a reasonable amount, not very. I'm no expert, but I can actually Resoprim these days. I've had 10 years to practice or more. And so I do feel comfortable with OpenSim and Second Life tools. So I figure, well, if I've got those tools in a vast region on my local disk, not to use as a social world or anything, but I can build to my heart's content there and not worry about copyright or my rights or anything, because it's all on my hard disk. And then I can save ORs and I can save XML files. I can save all the formats locally that I want to then deploy, not just on live open sim, but to space, to high fidelity, to wherever I want. My single-seated studio in high fidelity was exported from my local open sim, just converted to FBX and uploaded, I think it was. And there's a couple of things in space that aren't quite functional yet, but they were done in a similar way. They were initially brought into an open sim, which is totally private to me offline, and then I took them off and converted them. Right, I can see a busy Skype here. I know one of you is talking very rapidly behind the scenes. Let's go. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Right. Okay, now, guys, I'm going to have to start the wrap. So what I always do with our guests, though, is I close... I got Jay's to ask a couple of things. I just want to hear from you if any other thoughts, really, anything that I haven't got around to mentioning that you want to take the opportunity to mention while you're here, or just any exciting stuff coming up.
Well, I'd like to promote the building committee of the International Spaceflight Museum. It's open to anybody who has an interest in building, scripting, texturing, and wants to help fulfill the museum's mission of displaying all the world's different spacecraft, rockets, and other sorts of educational interactive exhibits about space and astronomy and so forth. And so we have, I teach two classes on Sunday, one that I'm actually late to going to right now for teaching scripting in SL exit region, as I'm heading there right now. And then at 5 p.m. on Sundays, grid time, I teach Blender in the Cookie 2 region. And immediately after that Blender class, the Spaceflight Museum's building committee has its building committee meeting at 6 p.m. In the IS Museum region, in the ISM Tower. And so the public is welcome to come to attend, to participate, to contribute, and to help us with our mission. So pitch it out there, and you're all welcome to come.
Cool.
It was great stuff indeed. Joey, any final thoughts? Anything you want to pitch quickly?
No, just
suddenly
I'm silent for a change. Yeah, I know. Well, no, because I've said so much already. I think. I mean, I just the one thing I'd encourage folks to kind of try to keep an open mind, and that's that a lot of times it's easiest to deal with to work with what you already know. But if you work with what you already know, you're going to stay status quo. And you're always going to be doing the same things to a certain extent. So sometimes you have to get outside your box. And like one of the things we sometimes run into with some of the creatives is they look at space and they see, oh, I have to learn Unity. Oh, I have to learn space. And they're looking at all these layers. But when you really take a look at things, a lot of times it's, especially like if you're a skin designer, you're a clothing designer, you're a furniture designer, in a lot of ways, home designers, it's easier to bring your stuff into Unity Space Engine than it is into an environment like Second Life. Yeah, you don't have to do all the work to make all these different levels of detail. The engine does a lot of the work for you because we're using things that have been tested by the gaming industry already. So I would just say, keep your options open. And that's one thing that I've really tried to focus on in my past 10 years in virtual environments is that if you really want to understand where the metaverse is going, you have to have more than one set of glasses. Don't just look at things through a SL set of glasses or an open sim set of glasses. You have to get outside your comfort zone and try things and, explore, even if it's just going into different places to look at them. I mean, I haven't developed for Blue Mars, but I did explore it a lot. I signed up as a developer. I interviewed for it and everything. I'm also signed up as a developer for some of the other environments, but I want to see what the possible is, and I want to explore the art instead of just being focused on what I've seen in the past. And I would just say, keep your eyes and your minds open because the future is going to be incredible, and it's going to be incredible for those that really have the minds to take a look and see what the possibilities really are.
Indeed,
Nice.
indeed.
Yep.
I'm always investigating everything new on the horizon that seems remotely remotely interesting to me in this field, so to speak. I'm willing. Incidentally, I'm willing, perfectly willing, to wear several pairs of glasses on different occasions. But I am not willing to stick a bloody motorcycle helmet on my head.
Oh, you don't want to put the Matrix thing in the back of your neck there, Mel?
I want some little
plugged in.
Right.
I want a visor that can go around my eyes and probably include my ears, a bit like that X-Men character who's got a visor that goes all around. And then some in-ear headphones.
The one I love is Star-Lord. I like to have something where I can press the side by my ear, and this thing comes up around me and gives me a virtualization of my interface is something that holographically projects around me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And,
that'd be awesome.
I don't
Maybe one day.
Now, I can't see people sitting around in sitting rooms with helmets on, but I can imagine getting on a train journey, and just as I plug my headphones into a music player, or a mobile phone these days, of course, why not a pair of glasses that simply plug in as headphones are portable speakers that go in our ear. I want a pair of glasses that's a portable monitor, but it's no heavier than my reading glasses. And then
take a look. I'll look for a link and give it to you guys in groups so you can all see it. There's this one, like I said, for the HoloLens, which is like about a $3,000 headset right now. But they're developing one that Microsoft is working on, where it's just like a set of BC glasses, very lightweight glasses that you'd put on. Obviously, a lot less expensive to produce as well. And that's really going to be the future. That and things similar to like Google Glass, where you can interact through the data with the people around you. I really think that type of augmentation of reality is going to be the future.
Yep. I actually, one thing that excites me, I've always said, is like how, not only wearing those glasses, like they're like a plug-in screen, but some kind of display system that would be like 4K or something, but could go from fully opaque to fully transparent. So I could wear them almost as like shades. Or I could switch to an augmented reality mode or a full virtuality. And I don't think it would be those three. I think it would be layers of...
Yeah, it's going to be layers, or it's going to make it a lot more... Like, another one to take a look at, too, is the Sixth Sense project that was from MIT Media Lab. That's been developed a good bit. It's being used a bit in India right now as well, I believe, by the developer. One of the things that was nice about that is it had a scanner. So it would scan things in your environment. Like, so if I met you on the street, Mal, okay, if I came to London and we happened to meet each other there, I'd have this thing around my neck and it would scan your face and auto recognize and know who you are. And it would project in front of your face a word cloud with the biggest words being the things that are most printed about you. So maybe it would have virtual worlds or, nice. Different things about you. That would be, projected. But then that's also going to bring up...
My glasses would simply tell me, warning.
Warning. Danger, Will Robinson.
Yeah.
Japanese warrior approaching.
I don't want what other people say about me to show up there.
And that's the thing is what happens... That's the thing is the augmented reality starts to challenge us in new ways. What does this do about our rights? For information to be posted. But the thing is, all that information is being posted from commonly accessible data. So it's not really defaming you. It's just posting information that's already online. So, but it does bring into to thought a lot of other issues that we need to think about.
Something I thought was actually going to be quite big for a while, but I saw it a bit and it just seems to have phased out. But they were bringing out T-shirts which had your Twitter barcode on them. So when you saw somebody walking down the street with the T-shirt on, you pointed it at their T-shirt, and it immediately gave you their Twitter stream. And there's a big thing about this for a while, and now seems to have fizzled out. I haven't seen any of those T-shirts for ages. But it was oddity, because after all, how often do you want to point at somebody and see their Twitter stream? But it reminds me of that. I think it's just the things that are going to become ubiquitous are just the easy peasy things. And I remember back in the days of metanomics, like you mentioned earlier, Mike. You know, we had endless conversations about all sorts of weird things like immersionism versus augmentationalism and stuff, and it all seems really bit odd now, because there's more shades of grey there than you think. But we also reckon that Second Life was going to be the center of the metaverse because it was at the time, in the early days, it was the first thing like it with user-created content, and you know, it was all remarkable because you know, except for high-end video games, which are games, different thing, we had nothing to compare it to. So we thought it was going to be the center of a metaverse, but blindly, somehow, we'd had endless discussions on this and how it was all going to move forward, and nobody ever really sort of mentioned the fact that we were doing all this and talking all behind a walled garden. You know, it was as if somehow that wall is going to come down, and of course, as we know now, it just got higher and higher. And but we also thought that people were going to use virtual worlds to slow down and sort of have serious conversations, meet with people, become more sociable and more productive. But in fact, you know, given all that happens is that instead of having meetings and saving on airplane fuel and damaging the environment, all people do is they buy a mobile phone and they take it all with them, but they still do all the stuff they used to doing, you know. And I wouldn't have foreseen
part of that too, Mal. Part of that too is that when we take a look back at how technology has evolved, it's generally additive and not replacive. So we don't generally, you know, we have some things that replace, like the computer in some ways replace the typewriter, but the typewriter is still out there for some, you know. But like radio was not replaced by television. You know, they both still coexist, and they just kind of grew to have their own functions. Yeah.
And I think, you know, mobile technology has just somehow fulfilled that need. You know, the ubiquitous phone, you know, first became a big cell car phone, and now it's just, you know, as small as you want it in your pocket, and it's a computer in its own right. So it's all slipped in there. The idea of telling people to enter virtual worlds and do things virtually is a pretty large step, even though it's only a screen. You know, it's not something that people's minds can stretch to thinking about until they've experienced it.
I used to carry a sat phone on my back, so I know what you mean. It's a big change to get to the small little cell phone nowadays.
Well, I remember back in, I guess it was the 1970s, I was one of, you know, a group of site managers doing rather vast rock concerts. And I think there were three of us, and we actually had cars assigned to us which had phones in them, you know, because we were up there like 6 weeks in advance, building and booking and everything. And you know, it was you know, it was just walkie-talkie gone crazy for me, the fact that I could just sit in one of these cars, and the big, you know, the big brick thing, you know, and of course the aerials popping out the roof and everything else. You know, but it was magic at the time. I thought, you know, I can sit in the car and I can wander around here and I can make phone calls, you know. You know, who knew what was coming next? And I think virtual worlds are probably like that now. I mean, none of us can foretell the future. But, you know, there might be something totally disruptive that actually takes what we've got and makes it ubiquitous. Or something going in our direction completely. Anyway, hopefully those directions will include open sim and space, if nothing else. I'm going to have to thank you all. We've been on too much, so I'm going to thank my guests for being here. Firstly, thank you to Sun Tzu, otherwise known as Joey Aboma, and I don't know how many times I've seen you this week, but yes. Thanks for coming, son.
Well, at least I didn't fight with you this time.
I'm not a fighting kind of person, but in terms of animation, we had a good one. Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
I never knew I was that good with martial arts. I really didn't. Yeah. It took me by surprise, an undiscovered talent.
There you go.
Yes. And also thanks to Mike Lorrey. Who I've been hoping to get on here for a long time. Man of, as we discovered, many talents, many involvements, many mics, indeed. So thank you very much, Mike, and hopefully we'll have you back in no time.
Glad to be here. Had a great time.
Wonderful. And thanks as always to James Out Loud, sitting quietly in the corner.
Well, yes, Mel, and yep.
He doesn't say much, but he's got his hands on all the camera controls.
Well, and I've been we did have a viewer comment today. Shellen Ayers made a really fitting comment about today's topic, that Sally Ride became the first American woman in space. Something that Mike might have written about or demonstrated.
I believe she's immortalized on a plaque at the International Spaceflight Museum, along with oh God, me dog and me monkey. What they Laker?
Right.
Laker and Sam or Ham? No, Ham.
Ham.
Yep.
Yeah. First woman, first dog, first monkey, and then those menfolk follow on, or something like that. I'm being facetious. Okay, everybody. Well, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Hope we didn't bore you, get too techy on you. We will be back same time, same place next week. Hopefully, our main guest will be Ferd Fredericks, but he's also known as Fred Bookhausen. I think I get the Ferd and the Fred all confused.
We all do.
Who is behind Outworlds and also an incredible creator.
I would also encourage you, if you've never been to him, go to Outworlds. He's got some awesome sims. I mean, it's very game-like and very explorative, and it's just a wonderful thing to check out.
And it's a good source. His site Outworlds on the web has always been not an exhaustively huge resource.
Well, he has probably the most open sim assets of any place in the world.
Yeah, lots of stuff to download, and they're not Linda Kelly. Sorry,
yeah,
Linda.
That's true. Well, he might have Linda Kelly there too, but he has a whole lot more.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, great site to go to. But we'll find out more about that next week. So for now, I'm just going to wish you all a very good morning, a very good afternoon, a very good evening, and possibly even a good tomorrow, depending on wherever and whenever you are. And yes, Adam, I'm talking about you. Bye-bye.
All right, cheers.